The second item that we have on our agenda after our call to order this evening is a reminder of our 3-month board priorities. Would just remind everyone who's been with us in the past and share with anybody who's not been with us in the past what these are and where they came from. We have, at the beginning of each 3-month period, met as a board and decided for these next 3 months, what are the areas where the board most needs to make progress for the sake of children. And for this time period, these were the 5 that our board selected. My commitment as a board president is to focus our work and our time on the areas that the board as a body has prioritized. And I wanted to start this evening by very briefly just saying how proud I am that these are all moving forward. You will see many of these items this evening, including some updates on our strategic planning process. We've heard about transportation in each of our last 2 meetings, and I believe you'll hear more about that this evening. It's a topic, transportation, that's important to many of us. For some, because it's been a major pain point this past year and before for families and staff. For others, because of the cost to the district, for both. You'll see we're discussing our bylaw review process that we have policy committee on Friday, and as we hear about
a few updates tonight. We are going to start with our update for our transportation survey. In the meantime, we also know that we have several of our families here tonight, our Montessori families. I think you can clap if you like to do that. During our COW meeting last week, we were able to bring to a culmination a couple-year process on Montessori curriculum. And so tonight, the Montessori curriculum is a part of the Treasurer's report. There is not an additional presentation tonight. That presentation was done last week, but it is on the Treasurer's report tonight. And a privilege and pride at this point to say thank you to all that are in the audience that helped to work on the curriculum. Give yourselves another round of applause. We also know that we have some of our families that are here tonight that also happen to be Montessori for NAM, because there are some concerns about the change in start time for NAM. So we're going to start with our Family and Community Transportation Survey responses, and then we'll open up to any questions that the board has for us at that time. And Rob, we're ready whenever you are. So we know that transportation has been an ongoing conversation for us, and as our board president shared, for our last 2 or 3 meetings, we have covered transportation as a part of those meetings. In one of the meetings that we had, where we presented the responses that we received as a part of our roundtable discussions, during the round, we had transportation roundtables where we invited anyone that was willing to come in and to review the information for really how we're going to become more efficient with transportation. At the end of the presentation, we then asked if a survey would be completed as a part of that process. What we found is that there were several that looked at the information but did not necessarily complete the survey. And so when we brought that information, it was a request from the board that we have some more responses from families, so that's exactly what we did. The plus to that, and Rob, you can go to the next slide. The plus to that is we actually had some answers by the time we got to that part of the process. So we were not just looking at all of the options that were available, but we were really looking at specific information that was more related to start time, more related to walk distances, so forth and so on. So we know that we needed greater feedback from the community as we were looking at our surveys and as we were looking at responses and how we were looking to do that. I think it is also important that we continue to get feedback on the best way to get information. Aside from our roundtables held in January and February, we got feedback from all of those and surveys, and these events were shared via social media. You know, we did paid advertisements for them, so forth and so on. We shared them through schools, but we always are looking for the best way to get the best information back. Next slide, please. Greater community response. So we relaunched the survey after the request from the board. And as of the 19th, we had 1,700 responses. This information gave the demographics for the response. For the response rate, 65% were parents of CPS students. 37, almost 38% were CPS staff members. And then we see taxpayers, alumni, parent and non-CPS K-12 students, and CPS partners. And individuals could select more than once. And so you might be a parent and a partner, a parent and a graduate. So we did want to have opportunity to capture our demographics in any way possible. And specifically, looking at transportation, we wanted to know what percentages fell in each area in terms of whether our students were enrolled and they were a walker or a car rider, they rode the yellow bus, if they used Metro. So this gave us more information about who was responding to the survey and what services they had already received. Next slide. So consideration for the two-tier start time, and the survey was broken down by really, at this point, we knew that we were looking at specific times. We shared that information already. We were really drilling into what those times were. And so we were able to get responses. And you see the breakdown for the responses. And this part is where it's really difficult, because in a two-tiered system, we know that there is a population that's going to be an early start and there's a population that's going to be a late start. And so our challenge is trying to make certain that we are pairing those that want an early start with those that want a late start, while also addressing all of the other parameters that we also had to look at, which was shared as a part of the transportation information. So if we look at the numbers, the most popular times were 7:40, 8 o'clock, and 8:50, and the least popular time was 9:10. Next slide. Additional survey summaries. So the questions around the other areas that we're looking at and the other areas that the board is really taking some responses from us on. Should we set mileage caps? 39%, almost 40% strongly agreed or agreed. There were 34% that didn't agree or disagree, and then 26% that strongly disagreed or disagreed. The maximum time spent on the bus was a range, and the least amount of time as the most reasonable are in order. And so the order started, of course, at 35 minutes and then went up from there as the time that our respondents felt was reasonable. Walking distance to and from school, and this had the most diversity when we think about really how we're looking to address the needs that we have in terms of walk distance. So currently we know that the state's requirement, or the state's guidelines, for walk distance is 2 miles from school, from their home, from their home to their school. For our district, previously it was 1.25 miles. This year it's been 1 mile from their home to their school. And so this allowed us to get some information on what the respondents felt were reasonable. So for K through second grade, there were 93% that thought 1 mile was reasonable, and 94, almost 95% that thought 1.25 miles were reasonable. And then we see across the board, the other 96% or so were neutral or they thought those areas were at least reasonable. And then when we get to third through sixth grade, for 1 mile, 87% thought that that was reasonable, and 1.25, almost 90% thought that 1.25 miles were reasonable or the most reasonable. And 1.5, 1.75, and 2 miles all averaged over 91% is neutral or least reasonable. And then our 7th and 8th grade, 1 mile, 81.9%, almost 82% thought that 1 mile was reasonable, and 84% thought 1.25 miles were reasonable. So to support our combination of van, bus, or metro services for grades 7th and 8th. One of the things that we've noticed this year is by any means necessary, we're using every appropriate safe resource to get students to school. So we've used vans, we've used buses, we've used metro buses, and the responses in terms of the combination for 7th and 8th grade, 63% or almost 64% agreed or strongly agreed that any of those service combinations would be appropriate, and we see strongly disagree, and neither were the same at about 18%, or a little over 18% for one. Additional survey summaries: opting out of transportation if compensated. 49% agreed or strongly agreed that this could be an option for them and their family. Transferring your child from yellow bus service to metro if compensated for 7th and 8th grade. 37% strongly agreed or agreed, almost 38%. And almost the same percentage also strongly disagreed or disagreed. Allow your child to walk less than 1 mile from your residence to a nearby centralized hub or bus stop dedicated to busing students to magnets. 47%, almost 48% strongly agreed or agreed with this as an option. And driving your child 1 to 2 miles from your residence to a nearby centralized hub or a bus stop dedicated to busing students to magnets. And 49% strongly agreed or agreed with this area as well. So when we think about our overall recommendations, currently we are implementing the first recommendation. And for those that have been following this story with us, we know that our presentation from the partner that we worked with, Formative, actually looked at addressing our issue with transportation in about 3 different phases. And so the phase that would give us the most opportunity for improvement was reducing and balancing the number of start times in the district to make them more efficient. And that's where we are now. So board members reviewed multiple new school start time options and impact scenarios during our April 19th meeting. And from there, we provided multiple recommendations that demonstrated impact to all schools, CPS and non-CPS schools. We did have 3 scenarios for 2-tier start times. One was the pure tier, so there was only 2 start times by school, 8 o'clock or 9:10. That actually showed to have the greatest impact, the greatest negative impact, the largest number of schools that would need to change. The paired 2-tier, 7:40 paired with 8:50 and 8 o'clock paired with 9:10 was the tier that was the most beneficial because it required the least amount of movement for our schools across the board. So while we understand that any school that has to change, there is a concern with the fact that the school has to change, but the reality is we know that we cannot get to the level that we need to for our students across the district, getting them to school on time if we don't change something. And no one wants to change their start time. We understand that. That's why it was so important for us to start communicating this as early as we can, knowing that August is coming soon. Board members provided consensus to proceed with option 1 and scenario B first, and that's where we are right now. We were asked for some additional information on changing the walk zone eligibility, which we did receive today from the Council of Great City Schools as well as Ohio 8, so we'll share that information with the board as well. Next slide. So this just really puts in a chart format what I just shared about the scenarios. And if we will notice, while there is impact across the board, one of the reasons for the impact is we had about 7 or 8 different start times across the district, which did not allow us to maximize the buses that we currently have. The scenario B allowed us to have the least amount of disruption. And so what we're referencing as the least amount of disruption. When we think about our schools, for schools that had less than 15 minutes, a change in their start time, there were 43 schools with less than 15 minutes, 7 schools with a change of 15 to 30 minutes, 6 schools with greater than 30 minutes, and for in-district schools. Of those 6 schools, 2 of them requested a later or earlier start time, and one of them right now is determining whether or not that was really the request that they wanted to make when they made that request. So we're looking to work through and try to address that with them as well. And then for our schools that were unchanged, there were 18 that were unchanged. We are meeting tomorrow for our board. We are meeting tomorrow with our non-pubs, with our non-public schools and charters, so that we can have the discussion with them, so that we can get more confirmation around the change for those schools as well. Next slide. And this just gave a visual. This was a part of our CAL last week. This gave a visual of the differences in the changes when we started looking at the movement. School coordination and community communication. So at this point, coordination, inform, problem solve, and coordinate tactics to support school operations and messaging with principals, and begin planning and logistics between CPS, transportation, and our bus contractors. So that's the first part of where we're looking to go next. Communications, district and school-based promotion and messaging. So one, placing a strong emphasis that the new start times are for next school year. We're not talking about this school year at all. We're looking to start with the new start times for next school year. We want to make sure that we maintain consistent messaging and an FAQ throughout the summer using all channels, placement, and distribution options, so that if there are questions that need to be addressed, you have one location to actually go to answer those questions. Beginning this week, leveraging the following tools and methods: media advisory, which will go out after our presentation today, hero and web stories for districts and schools. Of course, we'll put the information out on social media, and to all schools, we'll actually put out robocalls, emails, and texts, because even if school times are not changing, we do want to confirm for schools that there is not a change in their time. Questions for me around this part of the presentation?
Board members, questions for the superintendent? Hearing none, just kidding. Ms. Bolton.
So the recommendation thus far is about the start times, correct? And we don't have yet a recommendation regarding the 1 mile versus the 1 1/4.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Thank you, Superintendent. Other questions before we move on? Dr. Moffitt.
So I do have a question. Since Wednesday, since the last meeting, we have been inundated with lots of emails as board members from families that are objecting to that. So what my question is around the engagement to the families regarding the start times, because I know specifically North Avondale Montessori, there has been considerable opposition to that, and actually in other schools, well, I think Carson. So what, I know you're planning on sending something out. We are waiting on the walking distance, which I think should definitely impact this. But what engagement has been done with the families, because they're expressing significant dissatisfaction, but also that they were not engaged?
Right, so that process actually starts now, as I shared with the board when we started doing this information. We started by asking for feedback from principals simultaneously, while Formative was working with our team to really drill into what we needed in terms of buses. And so the great part about it is Formative, as the expert, and our teams both recognized that we needed 321 buses. And we knew that currently we had 317 that were available. And I'm using buses and drivers synonymously, just so that we're on the same page with that. They're across the board. For the most part, we were able to get pretty close to the times that principals gave. And so the beginning of March, we did a survey for all school principals to give us recommendations for their start time. And so for the most part, we were able to reach that. You referenced Carson. Carson actually requested a later start time, which is why we start that on the feedback that we received. And we've since followed up with them as well. NAM, and I understand the concern with NAM, because NAM, there wasn't a request for a later start time. But when we looked at the number of buses, we looked at the number of routes, someone else had to go in that later time. NAM had the exact number of buses that we needed for that time, and we could pair them so that it allowed us to get more students to school on time. So where the process now starts, based on the slides that were shared, is we are now starting with the engagement so that all families are aware. The other thing that we're doing for the 1 or 2, so far we have heard from 3 schools, NAM and Carson, and one of them we've already been able to address because it was just an error in the numbers that were transposed on the slide. But what we're hoping is that after we continue the work, Meeting with our non-pubs and charter partners. If there is a way for us to do change to address those, then we will do our best to do that. But we cannot make that guarantee because everything that we've done at this point is about getting the maximum number of students to school on time. And unfortunately, that means that someone is not going to get what it is that they're looking for. We're also working with our union partners because if there is the same situation where schools have had a change of greater than 30 minutes, we're looking at how we're able to work with staff that may have that as a challenge. And we'd be willing to look at the same thing for families as long as it's somewhere where students can walk, because we also can't move families from one location to another. That is then going to also increase transportation.
Okay, if I just may respond, let me clarify. The Carson was for the staff survey. They did a staff survey and sent us the data, and I think it was like 80% that did not want that. And then also, I'm still very interested to see the request from putting the pubs and our students and the non-pubs on the same bus and what that data looks like too. So hopefully that'll come as well.
Yeah, we've asked that question. That is a pretty extensive process. So we have asked the team how long it would take to do that. What we have focused on, as I've shared previously, is really trying to make sure that we get all of the information to maximize the buses that we have, using the available staff that we have to spend their time on what's going to make the greatest change for us. So we'll continue to look at that and give feedback in terms of how long it might take to get that information. Thank you. In terms of the other question for Carson, the response was from the principals initially. The survey that the staff sent to you today, I received that as well. Okay.
Thank you, Superintendent.
I have one more.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, so again, a point of privilege, and I think we'll all be excited about this. One of the exciting things about the role is being able to award and being able to recognize and being able to celebrate. So we want to thank Western and Southern because for many years, Western and Southern has had the Hawkins Educator Award, where one of our staff members is awarded at the very end with a $10,000 cash award for that staff member. That was one of the first events that I attended last year, and attending that event, I knew at that time that there was an opportunity for us to really recognize even more individuals, and Western Southern said, yes, let's go for it in terms of recognition. So for each of our schools this year, they've had more recommendations this year than ever in terms of the process. This year, we have a recommended Educator of the Year awardee at every one of our schools. From that process, we went from 65 to the top 15, and we recognized the top 15. And 2 Fridays ago, I had the opportunity to visit, by surprise, our 5 finalists for the Hawkins Educator of the Year Award, and all 5 of them are here with us today. I believe, Mr. Sherwood, all 5 are now here. Yes. All right. So we want to have them come up so that you can recognize them very quickly and thank them for what they have done for us. And we do have certificates for them as well. So we're going to start with, yes, and we're going to clap for them. All right. So I would tell you, every last one of them were really, really, really surprised when we went into their classrooms, but there was nothing better than the excitement on their students' faces as a part of that. So give us just a minute. We're going to come out there and recognize you again. Let's give it up for our finalists. Thank you. You announce it. Okay, that's Mr. Antonio Smith. Mr. Antonio Smith, one more time for Mr. Smith. He is a 4th and 6th grade math and science teacher at Ethel M. Taylor. Okay, Mr. Sherwood, if one of you will help me with the announcement so I can come out and recognize him. Thank you.
Check, there we go. So again, we have Antonio Smith from Ethel M. Taylor. We have Tracy Cummings from Sands Montessori. Mr. Brad Gerard from SCPA. Tracy, we're going to do one group photo and include the board members too, right? Absolutely. Miss Robin Day from Winton Hills Academy. And Dr. Mary Webb from Withrow University High School. Let's give them all a round of applause. We're going to take a photo. Board members, would you like to be a part of the photo? Please do. Yep. please come around. All right, let's give them one last round of applause. Your 2023 Hawkins Top 5 finalists.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. If that concludes our superintendent's updates for this evening, we are now at the item on the meeting agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will direct all comments to the presiding officer. Once a request to speak has been granted, you'll be invited to enter if you are online. Please click the camera icon to go interactive. Please provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a direct response to any question you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we do reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. After speaking, if you are online, you will briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners. Thank you. By my count, we have 11 in-person speakers this evening with the sheets that I have and the update from Phyllis. Mr. Hoying, do we have any online, or Rob, do we have any online? None this evening? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is read usually 2 or 3 people's names. And if you could come down when you hear your name called, it'll help us move between folks in an efficient way. So we're going to start this evening with Heather Gerker, followed by Nona Landis, followed by, I think this is Nikki Mayhew, and if I misread the first name, I apologize.
Hi, my name is Heather Gerker. My 3 children attend CPS Montessori programs. 2 are currently in 6th grade and 1 is in 9th grade. We moved to the CPS school district 7 years ago, specifically for the Montessori public school programs. And over the past 7 years, I've served as a parent representative on ILT, LSDMC, and am heavily involved in parent organizations at both Sands and Clark. As a credentialed Montessori teacher, I have a strong understanding and a passion of the method. I've witnessed the hard work of our teachers who work diligently to uphold the Montessori pedagogy while policies are being thrown at them that might not align to their pedagogy. Tonight, as Superintendent Wright mentioned, there are lots of Montessori folks here, if you can all just do this so they can see you. And we are all here to support the adoption of the Montessori curriculum and scope and sequence. There have been many teachers and administrators and staff that have worked so hard on this over the past couple of years. And honestly, this started when our Montessori program started. We've been talking about this for so long, and there are folks here that have witnessed that as well and been involved in this process. We believe that a solid step towards better supporting our Montessori programs is to approve the adoption of the Montessori curriculum and scope and sequence. And we're here to show that support and to ultimately show our support for our CPS Montessori administrators, teachers, families, and children. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Nona Landis, followed by Nikki Mayhew, followed by Rebecca Crispedes.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Wright and Treasurer Wagner. My name is Nona Landis, and I'm the LSDMC chair at Gamble Montessori Elementary, and I'm also their community representative. One of them, I represent the neighborhood of Westwood. It has been a real pleasure to be a part of the community at Gamble Elementary, which is a really new school. It was opened in 2019 because of the high demand for Montessori education on Cincinnati's west side. And it's just been really exciting to be part of that learning community as it's grown and as it's really become something super special. A lot of that because of the awesome leadership of our principal, Melissa Ridley, who's also here tonight. And Melissa will remind me all the time about when I first walked into Gamble and like took a little tour and looked around, and I was like, this is such a special place. And I knew I needed to be part of it. And a lot of that is because of the Montessori curriculum. And so, like was mentioned, there are a lot of us here tonight to sort of show our support and just kind of our excitement for the CPS Montessori schools and the curriculum scope and sequence that is set to be voted on to be adopted. And I really think what I want to emphasize is that this is the culmination of just many, many months, years really, of hard work and preparation by our Montessori principals, by our teachers and staff members and administrators. So I just wanted to take the time to speak tonight to really voice my and our appreciation and just how excited we are that this curriculum really is going to be approved and be like supported and integrated as part of the district as a whole, because it is like, it's such a unique part of what Cincinnati Public Schools is doing. So yeah, I'm just really thrilled that it's going to be more widely recognized and that more people, I think, will recognize the strength of CPS as a result. So yeah, thank you very much for your time and for listening.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Nikki Mayhew, followed by Rebecca Crispedes, followed by Evan Holt.
Good evening. I'm Nikki Mayhew. I'm a parent at Theater Montessori and the LSDMC chair there. I am here to voice my support for the official adoption of Montessori curriculum tonight in CPS. One in six students at CPS takes part in Montessori education within our district, which is, I think, huge. Our Montessori schools are such a huge part of what make our district great. And I know at the elementary level, our administrators, our teachers, our staff, everyone has been working so hard to soon be fully accredited alongside Clark and Gamble Montessori's. And I'm here just on behalf of the Montessori community to voice our thanks and support for this decision tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Rebecca Crispedes, followed by Evan Holt, followed by Cynthia Walters.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Cespedes. I am a parent and a teacher at Carson Elementary. I am standing here before you majorly as a parent. We did not agree to this time change. I feel like a lot of us parents did not even get to communicate with any of the staff about these concerns. On top of that, I am representing the Spanish people at Carson. We don't have anybody that could talk to us about this time change. We already have to come together as parents to take our kids to this school to be able to get them there. I take 12 Spanish kids to school every single day because they don't have a way to get to school because their parents start to go to work at 7 a.m. So if you change the time till 9, not only will that put me at a place where I take a lot of kids, but it would take a lot of Spanish kids away from Carson because we don't know what we would do with all of these kids that need a way to get to Carson at 7. On top of that, if we get out at 3:30, we already don't, like my other son gets out at 3. So if I get out after him, I wouldn't even know who would be able to pick him up, because like me, I'm a single parent. There are a lot of single parents who gather together to try to pick up all our kids together. So if you change the time, then we don't really know who would help us. And those robocalls, can they be in Spanish? I have a lot of Spanish parents that do not know what these robocalls are saying or understand what is happening at the school.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have next, I think Mr. Holt may have left, but if Evan Holt is here, calling that option. If not, Cynthia Walters is next, followed by Sylvia Nelson. Last call from Mr. Holt. Okay.
He left.
Next speaker, please. Thank you.
I'm Cynthia Walters, all things green schoolyards with Green Umbrella. This 2 minutes is about big difference. Thanking the people dedicated to delivering outdoor learning experiences and environmental education for CPS students. For detailed information about CPS Outside and what is proposed for the 23-24 school year, check out the packets I have provided. I am grateful to Superintendent Wright, who signed the Green Schoolyards Pledge along with Mayor Aptap. Superintendent Wright, I was inspired by the vision you shared that day that all school campuses should look like parks. I want to call out James Boyd and Tyrone Walton in facilities who have been instrumental in the process of installing 20 new outdoor classrooms that will supply many more CPS students with equitable access to green space. I am grateful to the entire CPS curriculum department, especially Dave Traubert, Liz Wolf, Ms. Campbell, Ms. Cherney, and Ms. Butler. I appreciate the collaboration to develop an effective system to ensure all students have NGSS-based curricula and partner programming throughout the district. I'm excited about the new conversations with dining services regarding nutrition education via school gardens to increase academic performance and overall well-being. I applaud Jessica Shelley and Lauren Marlowe for these efforts. The new Green Cincinnati Plan education goal is 100% of all public schools have safe and accessible green schoolyards by 2028. Green Umbrella held the first session of the Cincinnati Green Schoolyards Action Network to make this happen. Let's keep the momentum going in the next school year. Thank you, board members and Ms. Wagner for your support.
Next, we have Sylvia Nelson, followed by Stefan Pryor, followed by Michelle Dillingham.
Good afternoon, board members. I would like to speak about spend per student. The data I have seen shows that there is no correlation between the amount of money spent per pupil. The schools that perform the best, have the best report cards, have the least amount of money spent. To further understand this data, I would like to see the following information. Fixed versus variable costs per school, a breakout of what those variable costs are per school to understand if there are any trends, and proficiency scores by race per school. This will show if one school is educating a group of students better than the other. What we want to be confident in is that the district is spending the money to get the results we desire, which is high performance. Maybe the district can learn from a well-performing school and be able to spend money more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Stefan Pryor, followed by Michelle Dillingham, followed by Greg Leroy.
Taking a little time to get down. My fault, y'all. How y'all feeling?
Good.
I said, how y'all feeling? Only 2 people feeling good. Okay, then. All right, Ben, Curl, Mary, Brandon, Kareem, Dr. Kareem, Mike, and Superintendent Arnetta Wright and Jennifer. I'm going to call all y'all out. All right, Mike, we can't have no liquor in no school, man. No, I saw that in this resolution, you trying to get a request for some alcohol at the school. Nah, man, y'all need to get that liquor when y'all leave that school. Don't be getting drunk at the school. Come on now. Y'all can't be doing that. Alcohol license or trying to drink some liquor. Imagine somebody kid talking about, did you know them teachers got drunk at school at a party? That look bad, Mike. That look bad. Okay, all right. Montessori, I'm with them. The young lady up there told me at top, she here with Montessori. I said, I'm supporting you too. So whatever she's going through with this Montessori school, y'all need to come through. I done worked for half y'all up there and got y'all elected. I ain't charge y'all either. Keep it to yourself, all right? Okay. All right, tax abatement. If y'all can come together for some alcohol, y'all need to come together for some tax abatement, this residential tax abatement. Y'all need to get along with the teachers union. Did I get that right, teachers union? Where y'all at? I get that right? Okay. All right, y'all need to get together and push this issue with this tax abatement with the city council, what they doing. Y'all know they doing wrong. Don't never do right. All of them do wrong. Y'all know they do. That's why y'all laughing. So y'all need to stand behind them and everything, all right? And superintendent, stay strong, sister. They come after you too, boy. This city's something else, ain't it? They come after you, sister. Stay strong. Don't get new friends. Nuh-uh. Stay with your old friends because they're turning their back on your sister. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to tell you how it is. Did my bell go off?
That was the 2 minutes.
I
Thank
didn't
you
even
very
hear
much.
that. Hold on. It's like, no.
Michelle Dillingham, followed by Greg Leroy, followed by our last speaker of the evening is CFT President Julie Sellers.
Thank you, everyone, for the time. Michelle Dillingham, organizer with the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. I have some handouts for you. You know, teachers, we love handouts. I actually have a copy of our petition. I have a fact sheet about it, and I also have the 12-page report that Mr. Greg Leroy from Good Jobs First, he's flown in from DC to present to our city. And what this is about is some findings around the fact that residential tax abatements are those things that give a tax break to property owners in our city in the name of incentivizing people buying houses and fixing up their houses. And what we know is that they divert property taxes away from us, Cincinnati Public Schools. And it's never been really clear how much the impact is until we had an independent expert group, Good Jobs First, really reveal how much it's really affecting us. And in just the last 6 years, it's over $80 million. That is an incredible amount of money that are supposed to land in our school budgets and instead have gone to really just a handful of the wealthiest and predominantly whitest neighborhoods of our city. There's currently a lawsuit against City Council for this very practice. So we bring this to you not because you're necessarily the ones giving the abatements, right? City Council does that. But it's our money. It's Cincinnati Public taxpayers chose to give their precious dollars to us, our public schools. You are the stewards of those dollars, and we are hoping that you will stand with the community and support a ballot initiative to put the issue of tax abatements up on the November ballot. We're saying if City Council and the mayor won't do the right thing by our schools, then it's got to be up to us, the voters, to really make that happen. Is that 2 minutes already? That goes fast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll leave this information with you.
Thank you very much. We have Mr. Greg Leroy, followed by CFT President Julie Sellers.
President, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Greg Leroy. I'm the Executive Director of Good Jobs First, a nonprofit, nonpartisan research group on economic development incentives. Today, we released a study documenting that over a 6-year period, the Cincinnati Public Schools have lost almost $81 million to tax abatements in 3 different programs: the residential tax abatement program, the community reinvestment areas, and the tax increment financing programs. We found a disturbing pattern of race and income discrimination. Cincinnati Public Schools, Winton Woods, and Princeton City, the 3 out of the 9 biggest school districts in Hamilton County that we looked at, all have majority students of color in their student bodies, and they also lost head and shoulders the most money on a per student basis. They lost 3 to 23 times more money per student than did majority white school districts, the other 5 that we looked at, the other 6 that we looked at. We also found a disturbing pattern of failure to disclose. It took us way too long to do this study because you and the county auditor and the school and the city do not yet comply with GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, statement number 77 on tax abatement disclosures. That accounting rule took effect, was issued 8 years ago. It took effect 6.5 years ago. Y'all got to catch up and do it right. You're disclosing some benefits. You're not disclosing gross or net costs. So we can't have an honest cost-benefit debate, which is the whole point of the accounting change, unless both costs and benefits are disclosed. I was glad that we had a productive meeting this afternoon with the superintendent and the treasurer. I can't speak for them, but I'm encouraged that they are engaged on your behalf, hopefully to better work with your other bodies of government here locally to get this straight, because taxpayers deserve to know, and if there's going to be a debate about this in this year, they've got to have the full disclosure. They've got to have honest, robust disclosure where they can actually see costs and benefits. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker of the evening is CFT President Julie Sellers. And for folks who have not watched a board meeting before, the contract between CFT and CPS grants the CFT President the right to speak at any meeting. And there is a tradition of that time being both at the end of the hearing of the public and without the 2-minute time limit.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you to Greg Leroy from Good Jobs First from DC. He is a national expert. And in our meeting today, he said that he would be more than happy either to come back to Cincinnati or to have a Zoom call to give all of the board members more information and education around the impact of all of the abatements that are happening in Cincinnati. Once you get a copy of the report, I think you will find it very interesting. It is disappointing that the city, we know that they're the ones who give out the abatements, that it's disappointing to me that we don't have better policies around this. There isn't enough transparency of the abatements. And so it was really difficult for Good Jobs First to get the information, but we have been screaming about this since at least 2016 that we need greater transparency about abatements. Our students are not getting their fair share, but then remember, we do have half of our levies are fixed sum levies. So that's not just impacting our students and the funding coming into CPS, but is impacting every single taxpayer in the city of Cincinnati, because as people are not paying their fair share, other people are having to pay more. And I'm sure most of you have tax bills and you're seeing the increases, because if we have a $65 million levy, if there's one person paying, they're going to pay the $65 million. Or if we have a million people paying, they pay $65. So it is a fixed sum. So this is not just something that is impacting the district directly, but it's impacting every single taxpayer. I hope that the board takes a stand, that they are going to stand with us on the collection of signatures for the ballot initiative. If you have any questions at any time, read the report, and then we will do a follow-up, and we can have a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, whichever. I'm sure that many members of the community would also like to participate with that meeting because many people have questions. But I think that it's important that you look through this report, and as we move forward, especially with the levy coming, or the election coming up, that this will be on the ballot. We are collecting signatures. If any of you, while you're out collecting signatures for other campaigns, if you take a ballot, a petition with you, that would be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. With our hearing of the public completed, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the special meeting minutes March 20, business meeting minutes March 20, special meeting April 10, business meeting April 10.
So move.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. We're going to move next to committee reports. We have two this evening, both from Finance Chair Member Bolton.
President.
You want to just do both, and then we'll...
That'd be great. Thank you for the opportunity. We took the unprecedented move to have an extra finance meeting this past month, and indeed back-to-back within 2 weeks. The reason for the April 7th meeting was to catch the community up and the board up with the things that happened as a result of what we call the pause in the budget development, as well as to catch up and communicate the kinds of dialogue that had occurred between the superintendent and treasurer and our union leadership as we are coming to grips with the school budgets. And I would request that people check out the minutes. The minutes for the April 7th are actually in bullet form, which was very, very easily put together based upon what was happening and what we were talking about, and it's easy to also see some of the updates. A couple of the updates indeed dealt with our concerns about projections, dealt with some of our concerns as well, not just about projections, but also the role that formulas may play in a district that's trying to actually create a more equitable budget and distribution of resources. So we have any number of bulleted items, and those are available to you and posted. And part of that was a decision that was made on March 20th in a rather late night board meeting with the superintendent, literally making those decisions as we go, and we appreciate the superintendent and the treasurer for that. Most importantly, a chart that appeared in one of the presentations, and it pinpointed the kinds of hiring that was going to be taking place. I would also say that there was some adjustments made as well in this, visible in this effort on a couple of big topics. One topic was the high school transformation plan, which was adjusted but kept to its goals and kept to its ideas, and we're very excited about that. The other was really a review by schools and district-wide, the use and the expenditure of Title I dollars. Title I dollars follow just the schools or follow students. These are some very important philosophical and transformative discussions that took place. And also I would point out in that first meeting in the, I guess the first Friday that we were back from break and the pause was finished, it was also a long discussion about the use of vacancies and whether or not the district is fully staffed and what fully staffed actually means. And if you're fully staffed, what are some of the things that might not occur that are workarounds, whether it's overload pay or whether it's teachers being paid to lose their planning period, or whether it's paras substituting in areas where we need a grown-up to be there and present. So lots of good discussion that I think would impact, as well as a point near and dear to our president's heart, which is a rediscussion, if you will, of TAC, which seems to be an issue about how we adjust staffing in the fall. And then in the next week, we had the additional kind of discussion, but most importantly, the treasurer was kind enough to repeat a presentation from our financial town hall, which was explaining the significance and the reasoning behind the idea of us making a commitment, not just this board, but a couple of boards previously in the long-range planning, that the annual revenue from general fund and the annual expenditure of general fund dollars would be balanced. Our budgets are balanced, but the idea that we were matching the revenue in that specific area to the expenditure in that specific area was us trying to make sure that we can keep our commitment to the public regarding no request for new money as such. And so the presentation was there, and it was, I think, well received and actually pretty well described for all of us to understand. Finally, also, we dealt with the beginning of the central office, central administration budgets, and how that process would proceed. We had a review also of transportation issues that we were facing, as well as the community reinvestment agreements for our greater Cincinnati area, and then ended with an agenda list, if you will, for the next month. So, Mr. President, I submit these two, chock full of information, but easily absorbed in a new format from the April 7th and the April 14th finance meetings, and hope for acceptance.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bolton. So is there, let's just get a first and a second to approve the reports, and then we'll do discussion and questions. Is there a motion to approve? So moved. Thanks, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. So any questions for our finance chair on her reports? Mr. Craig.
Not necessarily a question, but I did want to highlight, again, the slides that the treasurer presented with regards to how the budget is being, how the actual budget works, how we're forecasting, and the need for us to be able to balance out those expenditures with the revenue. Really was a well done restatement of her presentation that was done in the board meeting. So I wanted to highlight that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Any other comments on the report from the Finance Committee? All in favor of accepting the report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. So we're going to transition in just a second to our first presentation this evening on our board self-assessment. Ms. Wagner, did you have a remark you wanted to make on finance topics before we move on?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make a comment on the Good Jobs First report on the tax abatement data. We received it early this morning, excuse me, and we did have a meeting this afternoon to discuss where the numbers came from, and then I was able to share some concerns, and I wanted the board to know that the data that's in here is very raw data, and it does not yet consider the impact of fixed sum versus a fixed rate levy, nor does it have an impact, consider the impact of the state foundation formula that removes abated properties from our wealth calculation. So had it not done that, our state share would be lower because we would be wealthier. And then there was some payments that we receive annually from the city up until 2019 and Hamilton County existing today, to the point of about the city used to pay us $5 million a year and the county pays us $10 million a year to help offset these issues. And so we've agreed to dig deeper into the data, but it's from my perspective, it's significantly less than the dollar values that are in here. What they're considering loss to the district is not cash loss to the district. And so I think it's a little bit confusing, and I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Wagner. So we'll invite up our guests for this evening, which we're going to hear from Cindy and Ray in our board self-assessment. As they're making their way down, I just want to thank all the board members for submitting their self-assessment information. And I also think, as this relates to the 3-month board priorities, one of the topics that's a part of this self-evaluation are the board operating procedures that we use. And so I have a feeling that kind of organically as we go through here, some of the topics that were discussed in Friday's policy committee meeting may come up, and want to just invite that part of the conversation as we go through here. So thank you all very much. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Lindy, members of the board, Superintendent Wright, Chief Financial Officer Wagner. Thank you all for having us. I'm Ray Hart. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools. We've been working with you for almost a year, not quite a year now. So I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to work with you. And then this is an opportunity for us to really take a step back and look at your board self-evaluation. We'd like to just lead a discussion about the process. Thank you for, again, for the board members who have submitted your self-evaluations. I just want to provide just kind of an overview of where we've been over the last year, and then we'll land on where we currently are. But again, we shared at the outset of this process that it's typically a 24-month process for our boards. And so we're not quite at 1 year. One of the things that we do is we focus on this as a continuous improvement process for the board. And we recognize that over the course of the last year, we have challenged you. We have pushed you. We are pushing you to change, make adjustments. And one of the things that we know is that change is difficult. Change is a challenge. We will continue to push you tonight, as we have, but we want to continue to work with you again over the course of the next year to really focus on and move the board to a space where the board can focus on its role in ensuring that the district is focused on student outcomes, that you're improving student outcomes. What we have on the screen is what we work with in terms of, or the motto that we work on, and that is student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Recognize the challenge in that. And lastly, one of the things that we'd like to share just over the past year is that that change for you has been pretty dramatic. You have welcomed a new superintendent. We have pushed you since our training last year to really make changes. And then you've also, over the course of the last year, developed goals and guardrails. You've listened to the community in establishing the vision and values of the community. And so we want to commend you for that, but then open up the floor to a conversation. And lastly, I just want to focus on where all of this started, and we'll add more detail to this if necessary as we go. But this all started with a look at your student outcomes data. And so we're taking you through this process all to focus on student outcomes and improving the outcomes for your member districts. So I'll turn things over to my colleague and introduce Cindy Ellsburn. Cindy is our Manager of Governance Services for the Council of Great City Schools, and we'll work together throughout this process of your self-evaluation.
Thank you all for having us here. I'm so happy to be here in person and not watching myself on the big screen on my computer. I actually usually put a sticky note over that piece of my screen. Anyway, I digress.
Cindy, as you get started, would you just pull the mic down about 2 inches?
I sure will. It's probably best that y'all didn't hear all that anyway. So just to briefly talk about what a self-evaluation is, I think you all have the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Manual, or if you don't, Ben will send that around to you. But it is a systematic way of the board looking at its practice using the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Framework. And by doing so, you'll be able to get a grasp on your current reality. Just like your superintendent is expected to reflect on the current reality for the students, your principals, your teachers are supposed to be, you expect them to be reflective. So this is a moment for the board to be reflective on its practice and to really understand where it's at in order to use it as actionable data to move forward and to make progress on practice and process improvements to set the context for improving student outcomes. The Student Outcomes Focused Governance Framework is a framework with 6 domains in it, and it's about effective governance. And we talk about 4 areas that can improve board governance. I want to go to the next slide. First, we talk about that focus of mindset. That's when we talk about student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Those aren't just, that's just not a string of words together. That is about having the mindset that adult behavior change is necessary. And that starts with me. So that inward reflection, we started with that when we were all together not quite a year ago, but last summer. Then we talk about clarifying priorities. This is about what you've done in listening to your community, and also looking at that student performance data to establish your student outcome goals and then the guardrails. And those are the written direction for the superintendent. Then the next behavior is monitoring progress, which you haven't gotten to that yet, and that's to come. But you monitor progress. The board monitors progress of those goals and guardrails to see if the district is and the superintendent are making gains, if there needs to be a course correction, to have those conversations and to be able to ensure that the reality is meeting that vision. And finally, to align resources. And this comes in a number of ways. One is in your financial resources, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go through this evaluation, but it's also aligning the resource of time. That's the board's time in how they spend it, and also how the superintendent and then from their staff is able to spend their time. On the screen for anybody watching at home or in the audience, these are the two documents. So if anyone is interested in following along, those are the links to those documents. And I think the board and superintendent, I think everyone has their own results and possibly a blank copy of the evaluation form that y'all can take notes on.
Coming around shortly.
Okay, and the way we're going to do this tonight, and the other thing before we get started, I want to commend you for doing this in a public meeting in front of an audience of parents, community, staff, anyone watching at home, because as much as it's important that a board is a policy setting body, a board is, in my opinion, even more importantly, a culture setting body. So by your being reflective, having these discussions about where you're at, where improvements might still need to happen, that sets a real tone for the district. So thank you for doing that. What we're going to do is just go one domain at a time, and we're going to talk about the scores that you gave yourselves, and then we'll come to an agreement around that, and perhaps have a discussion points that we'll pull out. I'm trying to watch and make sure everybody has what they need. I don't. Everybody have what they need?
We're trying to make sure everybody's got a copy. I have one more here. Does somebody need one? Send this down. Thank you.
Are there any questions before we get started on the process, or?
Board members have any questions? Let's keep going.
So first, starting with vision and goals. Everybody have that page in front of them? Vision and goals.
Is there a copy that you also want us to have up on the screen? Would that be helpful?
Don't have a copy to put up on the screen. I have other slides to share. Those links will take it to them. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. We ready? Who's willing to share the score that you gave yourselves for the vision and goals section? Who would share their current score for this page? Anyone?
Eddie.
Mike?
0.
0. Thank you. Thank you, Morosky. Anyone have anything different than that? Maybe you'd like to give us the rationale as to why.
Excuse me. So on our Excel sheet, for folks who can't see it, in the first we have the three little sections, and if any of them are true, then the score is 0 regardless what the rest of the columns are. And the Two of them I had that we were doing okay. One statement was the board has not adopted goals. I said no, because we have. The other one said the board has not hosted opportunities to listen to the vision of the community during the previous 36-month period. I said no, because we have. Where I said yes, where I agreed, was that the board has not consistently demonstrated the ability to distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And I said, my opinion was yes, partly because I don't know that we've really talked as much about that as the other things. And notably, there are a lot of positive things going on. But if one of those is true and one was on mine, then the score is a 0. So that's why.
Thank you. Someone different than that? President?
I didn't have a 0, Mike. So I had 35.
Okay.
I'm a positive thinker.
All right, Ms. Weinberg?
And I'll just add in as well, I actually also had 35. Hit 35 too.
Dr. Moffitt?
I had 25.
25?
We had 25 before, and so I thought that, I'm trying to pull this up at the same time as I'm doing this. So I thought that where we lacked was in the root cause analysis. It said the board relied on a root cause analysis, comprehensive student needs assessment, and/or similar research-based tool to inform identification of and prioritization of potential goals. I thought it says, is this true now? I said no. I think I'm doing this right. So I just said 25.
Okay. President Lindy?
Thank you, Cindy. I also, with Dr. Moffitt, had a score of 25. I thought we had the right outcomes for the red section. I thought we were doing all of the orange ones. So some example, adopting goals and guardrails, those being SMART, no fewer than 1 and no more than 5 goals. In the green section, I also had us doing these. So just for example, interim goals pertain to student outcomes, student outputs or student outcomes, not inputs or adult outputs. I thought the interim goals were pretty strong, and just agree with my colleague around not doing the root cause. I had one other in the blue category that we weren't doing yet, so I had 25.
And not to repeat anything that they have already said, I agreed with Ben and Dr. Moffitt's for the exact same reasons.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, this is just my little slide. This is about the importance of doing a self-evaluation of the board assessing itself, because what we always talk about is that a superintendent cannot outperform its board. So a board being self-reflective on its process means that the district, the superintendent, when it comes time to evaluate her, the board has done its role. Okay, next slide, and the next slide. Okay, here we go. So who remembers the inputs, outputs, and outcomes? Y'all remember what those are? How would you demonstrate? How would the board, who owns which? Let's start there. Who owns outcomes? Anybody remember when we talked about outcomes? Mr. Morosky?
Superintendent, coach, all of us.
So you're thinking back to the
Yeah.
baseball game analogy,
Yeah.
right? So Morosky says the superintendent and all of us.
Yeah, us.
You go ahead. Who sets the outcome goals? Because we go on further to differentiate student outcomes from adult outcomes. So who sets those?
the board sets the outcomes, the superintendent would manage the inputs and the outputs.
Yeah. So the outcomes are those things knowable at the end of the cycle. When it comes to the differentiation between student outcomes are about what students know and are able to do. Adult outcomes are everything else that's produced in a school system. And then those inputs that are those things knowable at the beginning of a cycle, that belongs to the superintendent, or in the baseball analogy, the coach, or we had some argument about manager, but the superintendent. So how would a board that consistently demonstrates the ability to distinguish between inputs and outputs and outcomes, how would they demonstrate that?
Well, so I think the board is focused on setting the goals for the district, recognizing the need to set goals that are attainable or SMART goals. It gives a clear direction, and then from there, it allows the superintendent to make the steps or figure out the how to get there. The other thing is the board sets the guardrails to provide the things that are the values for which we would not violate in our efforts to achieve those goals. So I think we've done that through our goals and guardrails process to set those goals based on what the community provided feedback on to us, as well as the guardrails.
So when you look at inputs, outputs, outcomes, one of the things that we'll be doing, continuing to do with you over the course of next year, and we have one person who said, I don't think we've discussed that enough. I don't think we've gone deep enough into inputs, outputs, outcomes. One of the things that we'll continue to do, I think consistently with two exceptions, the two exceptions gave you zeros on the inputs, outputs, outcomes. But everyone else said, we're doing that part of the process. And what Cindy and I did is we reflected on our observations of your board meetings. As we reflected on your scores, we said, okay, we're going to give you all the inputs, outputs, outcomes, because pretty consistently everyone was the same except that one item, and then a few down in the blue section. But what we'd like to do is say, okay, let's take a look at it. And Cindy and I are going to do as we would want to do as coaches, is we're going to do what we call trust but verify. So what we're going to do is monitor your meeting today, and then we're also going to monitor some of your other meetings to say, okay, how well are you doing with inputs, outputs, and outcomes, particularly as we transition, as we move forward. So we conveniently gave you full credit for number one. So for vision and values, we gave you, or sorry, for vision and goals, we gave you full credit, but we gave you full credit with the notion that we're going to continue to monitor it and continue to give you feedback. Does that make sense? And we'll continue to monitor how you go. So we were consistent with those who gave 35. Even in the blue area, we thought that there were some things that you're already doing, but we'll continue to lift you up. Remember, we said this is a continuous improvement process. So from a continuous improvement standpoint, we felt like the 35 was strong for vision and goals for now, and you've made significant progress compared to where you were when you began.
As a point of clarity, that's a perfect score in this section. Is that right?
As a point of clarity for the community, 35 is the highest you can score.
We got the highest possible score on the first section. That's great. Good job, everybody.
Before we leave this section, there was some question about the root cause analysis or comprehensive needs assessment. And my understanding of the data that was brought forth for the board to review is that it came off the tail of a comprehensive needs assessment. And I would ask Superintendent Wright to verify or my understanding, or if I'm off there, please share.
Thank you. I think you're asking about the data that we used that the board used to set the goals. It was after for the those that were based on OST or based on our end of course exams, it was based on last year's data. So that was based on the most recent assessment data that we had.
And the last thing I'll share before we move on to the next section is what do you think is typical of boards? We've got a long list of things that you've got to accomplish or hit as you go through each of these sections. But what do you think also happens? Do you think you hit all of these at every single board meeting? All right, so the answer is no. So as we go, remember we talked about continuous improvement, but what we will do is as we see things, as we listen to board meetings, as we watch them, we watch quite a few. As we listen and watch, we'll continue to plug in, okay, you hit it generally, but here's a situation where, does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first section. So we're in agreement, 35 is the consensus score?
Can I ask,
Yeah.
Ms. Bolden, sorry, go ahead. Can you turn your mic on?
Please repeat what you're about to say twice.
So what we're trying to do is come to agreement of the board. Ray and I mentioned what we said. Reach a score as the board agrees to it for that one section. So we said 35. There was some question about the comprehensive needs assessment. So the data that was analyzed, the data from the last year's data was analyzed and by staff and others to come forth with those high leverage, high need areas.
Ms. Bolden, does that answer your question?
It does.
Great.
I like it.
I just wanted to ask if that's okay before we move to the next section. Mr. Morawski, you had a 0. There's a big difference between 0 and 35. You feel okay about 35?
Sure.
If I may point out, Whit, for Mr. Morawski, we force you to 0 if there's any one of those first 3 items that is missing. And what we're doing is generously giving you one of those first 3, his score would have been higher as well if he had given one of those first 3. However, again, we'll continue to monitor it to say, are you really truly hitting all?
Yeah, and to be clear, if my 1X in the yes column was moved over, my score would have been a 35 because everything else. But I followed the instructions like I was told.
You did.
And it said, be honest. The first page said, be honest, even if it's terrible. And I also want it to be known that my other 2, real quick, there's 2 more boxes public. One that says potential score in 3 months. I said 35 because I feel y'all could actually learn what these words mean in the next few months.
Right.
And then 6 months, I gave you a 35 plus because I figure y'all could really figure it out by then.
Must see TV.
Thank you.
So the other piece to that, as Mr. Morawski mentioned, you'll be doing this again in 3 months. So as we monitor and watch, we might not be so generous next time. So just next, Ms. Bolton says. So thanks. We'll head on to the next one. Next, we'll go to values and guardrails. Who will share their current score for this page?
I'll go.
Yeah, Ms. Jones.
15.
15
was my score.
And by the way, for the public, 15 is the highest score that that you can have. You can have either a score of 0, 5, 10, or 15. Yeah, Ms. Weinberg.
I also gave a 15 as well.
15. Lindy?
I gave us a 5.
A 5. What was your rationale for not having a perfect 15?
So it would be much higher, it would be at least a 10, except for one question for me. The second of the orange boxes says the board has adopted no fewer than 1 and no more than 5 guardrails. We adopted 6 guardrails, and that's why I put that as a no, which is why it kept me at a 5.
And Mr. Lindy, President Lindy, excuse me, on that one, what's the scoring rubric? So if one of those boxes in the orange category is checked, what's the scoring rubric there?
Well, I might have messed it up. I'm reading if nothing is marked yes in the red, Oh, I did mess this up. And all items are marked yes, which is not true. We'd have a 5. So I'd like to revise my score, if I may, so that it is now a 0.
Okay. Any other members of the board? Thank you. So 0. Just want to make sure we're clear on the scoring.
I'm noticing that when Ray asks me a question, it means I did something wrong. But thank you.
He learned that at Walnut.
You better behave.
So to that point, if you could go to the next slide, this is, that's the definition of guardrails, if, for those who need to know. The next slide, please. And the next slide, sorry. Here we go. And I don't know how well you can see that, but there are a couple of things that I would ask if the board has hit on. And one is, does each guardrail describe a single operational action or class of actions that the superintendent may not use or allow in pursuit of the goals? And then, as President Lindy mentioned, the board has adopted no fewer than 1 and no more than 5 guardrails. Fewer guardrails allow for more focus, more allow for less. So is there anyone who disagrees with that? Well, first, you did, there are 6, and if you go to the next slide, we'll pop those up. So there are 6 guardrails. Does anyone see any of these that are not fitting of a single operation, single action, operational action, or class of actions? And why does it matter? So why does this matter? Why does it matter to have no more than 5? And why would it matter to have so why does it matter to have no more than 5? Why is that part of the framework? Ms. Bolton?
My understanding from this process is that allows us to concentrate and focus and therefore help people more accountable. That's my understanding. But we did get 6 in there through advocacy and pushing. No, we all did. But also those 6, there's one where we had a number of things in the same one, and I know that was not kosher either, but oh well, it's a board.
So why do you think we push for no more than 5, and then also the singular, which you saw in the previous one? What happens when you start to drift away from that?
Well, so I'll say, I think the purpose of limiting the number is that you don't want to get to a point where you've so overly restricted the superintendent's ability to be creative in how she does her work that it becomes more of a mandate and like limits the opportunities for her to establish the process. I think to Board Member Bolton's point, the 6th one, I think especially this year was more in tune with the concerns that were placed to us from our community with regards to various issues that are all being tackled at once. And so in some ways, in a little bit, I gave ourselves a little bit of grace in this first year in that I felt like our 6 items we narrowed down to as specific as could be based on the impact we received and based on what the board felt was a reflection of that. I gave myself a little bit of a grace in my scoring of it, but.
So I think that's perfect. That's one answer. So it's part A of the answer, if you will. And that is, yes, the more guardrails you have, the more limiting you are. And then the more it becomes here's what we want you to do. So as you take those guardrails and you bring them further and further in, you're narrowing to almost a mandate for the superintendent. But there's something else that's critical about each one of these plus the goals. So what happens under the goals and the guardrails? What does the superintendent have to provide under the goals and guardrails?
Interim goals.
Interim goals and interim guardrails for every one of them, right? So what happens, so if I start to add 5, 6 7. So I've got 5 goals. I've got 6 guardrails. Under that, the superintendent is adding 2 to 3 interim goals and guardrails. What am I doing to the superintendent? And the staff. So the staff are behind us.
Potentially handcuffing her to data performance collection?
Not so much handcuffing, because that's what the process is to say, here's the goals, here's what we want you to accomplish. And we want you to focus on these so we actually accomplish these goals. So critical thing we're saying is we want you to focus. But as I add more, what am I doing?
Also just creating work that could otherwise be focused, or attention that otherwise could be focused on accomplishing the goals and other things for the district, into monitoring the various different guardrails and interim guardrails from the superintendent and interim goals that are set up. So the more you have, the more there is this process of them having to bring information back, monitor this information, collect this information in a way that takes away from the other work that they might be able to do in that process.
And if everything is important, what?
Nothing's important. It waters it down.
It waters it down. If everything is important, then nothing is important. So the more you add, the reason we stick to, or we suggest sticking to those 5 and 5, and just as an aside, I'll also remind you, when we did this as a part of the initial part of the process, but there are, at the back of the manual, there are a set of reading materials. And don't take our word for it. Those reading materials are actually the foundational materials that produced the document that you see. So we relied on research to produce why we came up with the 5 and the 5. The more you add, the more you thin out the superintendent and the staff's ability to actually focus on your priorities. And so that's, even though you think 6 is a small number, 6 actually adds another 2 to 3 additional targets that the superintendent has to meet. And they all might be important. But again, as you listen to the community has lots of ideas about what's important. But your job as a board is to say, okay, let's focus on a small number, accomplish those, and then add to it. So as one of them gets accomplished, we'll take it off and replace it. So that's why it's there.
And I think the only thing I'd add to that is it doesn't just water it down. It does, and but taking that focus off actually takes away the ability to actually achieve it. So or to honor it. So just wanted to add that. Dr. Moffitt.
So I sincerely appreciate it. The lesson and the framework, absolutely I do. This is where I'm struggling, because when you say that and I understand that the board's responsibility is to the community, we are to take what we hear from the community and to kind of, I don't want to say water it down, but to put it into a framework. Where I struggle is that it takes us 6. And so I don't want to tell the community, I don't think it is our responsibility to tell the community, well, we're not going to work on that right now. We heard you, but we're not going to work on that right now because we have to quantify it to a 5. I would much rather, because we can't have them be multiples. That's the instruction. They can't have a task that has multiple details. It needs to be singular. And so I think that it just, for me, it's really clear that the community spoke, and we did narrow it down. We struggled with this, and I think you all remember, we really, really did struggle to get to 6. So what that tells me is that the community has very, very clear aspirations from a historical perspective and for a future perspective. And I don't know if we can really water that down, or if it's our responsibility to take those out, particularly when we depend upon the community for passage of levies, engagement sessions. So explain that to me. Can you reconcile that to me? Because I really am struggling with the responsibility to the community. And if it takes 10, I think that, we depend on them fiscally. And that says a lot. That says that, hey, this is what we want to preserve. And that as elected officials who get elected by the community, this is what we expect you to hold the superintendent accountable to. And so getting them to 6 was really a struggle. And they really all are very, very singular. They speak to specific things that make our district very unique and that make it very, very make us what we were, which was, we weren't a failing dish, or we had some issues, but we have some great stuff going on here. So I'd just like for you to speak towards the reconciliation of, if your community says 6, how do you justify keeping something off that the community has deemed very valuable and very relevant, and get your levies passed? Because that's who we're ultimately responsible to.
Be happy to, and thank you for that. And we recognize that. I think one of the things that I started off by sharing is that we're asking you to change, and change is really, really hard. And so we recognize that, particularly given that you're representing the community. The one thing that I would share is that the next phase of this process is not just to evaluate the board, but then to evaluate whom. So it's a board self-evaluation, but what does the board then turn around and do? Evaluate the superintendent. So the board does a self-evaluation and the board evaluates the superintendent. When you go to evaluate the superintendent, what is one of the things that you have to keep in mind? If you want to hold the superintendent accountable, what is one of the things that you have to keep in mind about the superintendent's ability to accomplish what you've set forth? What happens to that ability if you struggle to prioritize? What happens to the superintendent's ability to accomplish all of the goals, any of the goals and the guardrails? What happens?
Well, it divides up her ability to do that work. So if we give her 12 things that she has to do in order to be successful, from our measurements, that it makes it so that those 12 so-called focus items become more difficult to do the more you get. And so if you have a smaller number of those focus items, recognizing other factors that still need to be maintained and still need to be cared for and attention paid to, it allows for us to be able to set measurable things that can be attained and achieved with a dedicated focus towards it.
So it becomes harder to hold the superintendent accountable. Again, what we're trying to say is, as you do the process, the more you have, the harder it is to accomplish it all. And some of the things that you want the superintendent of the district to accomplish aren't even listed here. One of the things that we heard earlier today was a presentation about transportation. Transportation, other things, there's all the other things that go on that aren't even in the goals and guardrails. And so just understanding that process, and yes, I completely understand. The challenge is that you're saying we want to do this, we're struggling to prioritize as a board. And so because we're struggling to prioritize as a board, it's going to make our staff struggle to prioritize as well.
It does help. Just to be completely honest with you, if we don't pass a levy and we don't have money, the priorities are real simple. It's going to be whatever you have money to do. So I think that there's a small conundrum there between honoring what the community has said is important and then watering that down. I think that the responsibility, I completely agree with you that too many things sometimes make it very impossible to get things done. But I also think that there has to be a spot where, if these things are things that we prioritized historically, it just has to be honored. And that's
completely understand. The one last thing I'll share, and this is what we've observed in other communities. Matter of fact, we observed it. We were listening to another school board who's going through the same process. They're a little further along. The number one thing that we talked about, which we've moved past, so we didn't even get into the details of it, but the first thing is to establish what under goals? Student outcome goals. Structure everything so that you're able to focus on those student outcome goals. And we'll get to that in a moment. If you hit those student outcome goals, what do you think is going to happen with the levy? The levy will in all likelihood pass. So what you want to do is you want to minimize what you're doing in all the other aspects of the district to allow the district staff, yourself as a board, to focus on student outcomes. And that's where as I mentioned earlier, we're going to push you. But what we're pushing you toward is push yourself to focus on student outcomes. All those other things will take care of themselves. The levy will pass if you hit the student outcomes. Does that make sense?
In theory, yes.
And Dr. Moffat, I think the only other thing that I would add, and
Cindy and Ray, can I just request
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
this, with the sound quality, if the mic is a little closer to your mouth, it's easier
Okay.
for everybody. It's for both, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so I think the only other thing I would add is, and we get to this a little bit later in the framework, but it's around really engaging with the community in a way that they come to understand, having community SOFG, student outcomes focused governance sessions, and reporting back to the community and really having that two-way engagement so that they can start to learn more about what it is that you're doing through this framework so that they can, I suppose it would be a more informed opinion, and as they understand more about the purpose and what it is that the board is doing as far as prioritizing the representation of their vision and values, the community will learn and eventually come along then as well as time goes on.
I got you.
Yep. Okay, so if we have a 0 for values and guardrails, in the next 3 or 6 months, does anyone see any of this changing? And what that would, changing in this fashion would clearly require some tweaking. So either the board is willing to do that at that point, this summer as we revisit goals. Sorry, I forget to talking to the mic. Or will it stay 0? President Lindy.
As much as I'm an overachiever and as much as I like to get the highest score possible, like we did in our last category, I got to be honest, I don't necessarily see this changing in the next 3 months. And I think we have other fish to fry. I think we have worked really hard to get community feedback. We have 6 guardrails. We have some smart interim guardrails. I think building some habit around using them to monitor our performance, I think would be healthy. And in the long run, great, let's make it better. But that's my perspective.
Anybody disagree with that? And the other thing that I would say as well, even if that's going to be the thing that keeps you from that score, the other things that you have a no in, it doesn't mean that you can't be working on those other points within the framework on that page. So, it's still progress that can be made with whatever that is that you would agree to. All right, are we ready to move on? All right. Next section is monitoring and accountability. And for this section, the highest score that can be achieved is 30. So it's 0, 10, 20, or 30. Who would share their score?
So I'll share my score, although I'm seeing that I transposed 2 numbers in my original form that I sent in. But I gave us a 10 because I felt like we were in that that we had established some calendars as far as monitoring certain data based on when the data become available. And so I know we've already done that in some of our Cal meetings as well. We've again led a calendar of when those things would be brought to us and an idea of kind of a regular schedule of that. And then the only one that I was giving us, at least in my opinion, giving us a little grace on is the final one within that one, which is the superintendent is evaluated only on performance regarding board's goals, guardrails, interim goals, guardrails. And part of that is because the state requires us to measure in a slightly different formula than just on goals and guardrails. And so I somewhat adopted that part to also match within the state requirements. Because there's competencies as a state that you're supposed to evaluate superintendent based upon. And so to say that we're only doing it on the goals and guardrails didn't seem exactly how the state would require us to do so.
Anybody have something different than that?
I had a 0 because, first of all, I wasn't familiar enough, frankly, with where we were on interim goals. And also, I think we are evaluating the superintendent on things more than we're right here. So that public needs to know this is really weird scoring. It's like negative scoring, and like if you can't pass this block, you get a 0 no matter how many more blocks there are. This is not like you get, one score here, another point. It's very weird, but I had a 0 because I wasn't familiar enough with the interim, and I felt that we were evaluating the superintendent on more than what was listed here. And there were a couple other reasons too.
I'll add to that. I also had a 0, and I also had some uncertainties in this category for some of the same reasons that Ms. Bolton stated, but also I started thinking more and more about how we use the committee of the whole and what we might do differently. So I couldn't, that's where I was. So I was like, well, it just didn't feel right because I don't feel like we're there yet in terms of monitoring and the accountability piece. So, but it's food for thought. We have some work to do.
Zero. For a different reason, the one in the red section, so similar to the other ones, right? If you have yes for one of those and the whole thing is, right, tossed out. And the one that there's a statement, the board has not consistently demonstrated the ability to distinguish between customer service / issues and owner service issues. I don't know that we have. So everything else was yes. And again, just to answer a question that wasn't asked of me, potential score in 3 months, 30, potential score in 6 months, 30. But that one, I didn't think we were good at.
I just echo my colleague, Mr. Moreski.
Any others?
Originally, I think I had a score of 30, but I realized that I answered something incorrectly in the red. And if any of those were true, then my score should be 0.
And which one was that?
The one that Board Member Moreski talked about the customer service.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll talk since everybody's looking at me. So I really echo everything that was said. I don't think the customer service and issues and owner, the board has clarity on that. And then I also am really not clear on the interim goals. The other one that I wasn't really clear on, and could very well be me, is that the board does not schedule each goal to be monitored at least 4 times per year. I'm not exactly certain how we're monitoring. So again, the interim goals I'm not clear on, and then I'm not exactly sure on the process of monitoring, if that's even been established. I must have missed that memo. So I thought we were at a 0. And for 3 months, I thought we may be at a 10, but I see 3 and 6 months at maybe a 10.
So just for our perspective, we agree. And so I remember we started off that this is a continuous improvement process. And I think, Board Member Jones, your observation that I began to think about how can we do things differently in our meetings, through our processes to begin to accomplish these is the perfect way of thinking. Remember I talked earlier about this as a 24-month process of beginning to put things in place, beginning to monitor, beginning to create kind of a monitoring calendar of what does this look like? How do we do it? And so that's the process that we're in. So I just want to reiterate that it's not a yay or nay. It's not a yes, we've done it. No, we haven't. It's a here's where we are in the process. And so your observations for monitoring are absolutely spot on. And exactly what we would expect at this point in time. You want to say something? Okay.
So I think a few things to add to this, just to bring about a little more clarity around the monitoring process and around scheduling those reports 4 times. Talking to the mic, thank you. About the 4 times per year, scheduling the monitoring reports. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, now the next one. So these are the definitions, and all of the definitions can be, this is another definition that can be found in the back of your Student Outcomes Focused Governance Manual. But this is a board-adopted multi-year calendar, so it is going to have your actual goals and interim goals calendared on it. That's something that the superintendent and her staff will be working on, so that you would have that to adopt prior to the next school year, the monitoring cycle. And then you would actually be receiving a monitoring report that shows the current reality of your goals against against where you want to be, and be able to understand the superintendent's analysis of that data. So those are things that have not happened yet, but those are things that will come along the way. So I wanted to make sure we were clear on that piece. My notes, there was another thing that I wanted to point out in here, and I think if you go to the slide before, so these are 2 things that are under monitoring and accountability. One is that the board has been provided copies of, but unless required by law, did not vote to approve or disapprove the superintendent's plan for implementing the goals. And then the second one, if a board approves an annual budget, it does so only after determining that the board's goals are the first priority for resource allocation. Why do you think that these things are under monitoring and accountability?
I mean, I would imagine it's so that the board stays focused on outcomes and not inputs or outputs, to our earlier conversation.
Yeah.
So that the board is responsible for making sure the student outcomes happen, but the leadership is responsible for allocating resources, managing inputs, tracking outputs in service of the ultimate student outcomes.
Right, yeah. So thank you, President Lindy. So when we think about the implementation plan, and then the fact that the board will, at a time in the future, be receiving monitoring reports that that describe many things, and there is a monitoring guide in the back of your SOFG manual as well. Part of that conversation, and as the superintendent is analyzing the data and bringing these reports, might require a course correction in such that strategy has to change. So if the board has to constantly approve, and if the superintendent needs to ask permission, you know, at the next meeting or what have you, it can really stifle progress toward those goals. So that's one of the reasons. And then the part about the budget, this is that alignment of resources piece. One of those, when we talked about the 4 behaviors, alignment of resources being one of those of effective boards in setting the context for improving student outcomes. So ensuring that helps with the accountability that of the system toward ability to achieve the goals. The other thing I wanted to talk about in this section, actually we'll wait and talk about that in the next section. Does anybody have any questions in the monitoring and accountability? So right now, you would be at a 0 because several of those things are probably, several of the things in the red have not happened. The goals and guardrails have not been scheduled yet on the monitoring report or on a monitoring calendar. The board is not tracking its use of time in public meetings. The board, there was some mention about the customer service and owner service issues as well. And then the school system has not actually achieved any of the interim goals yet because you haven't started working on them. That's the next cycle. Is there anything that you think can be true by in the next 3 months from any of these sections?
Cindy, I don't think so. And I think I want to say thank you and Ray for the discussion too. Did you think 15 minutes or so we could
Yep,
get through the
we
last
can-
sections?
We can wrap up the last couple sections.
Thank you very much.
quickly. So we'll stay at 0 for the next 6 months. All right. Communication and collaboration is the next one. Anybody want to share their score there?
Zero.
Anybody have anything different than that? Okay. I think we're in agreement on a 0. Anything that could be different in the next 3 months or the next 6 months? Mr. Morosky?
Just the only reason we got a 0, again, there was one in the red, and the one in the red was more than 6 authorized public meetings in a month, and board committees counting toward that total. So I guess for my sheet at least, it would be like one less meeting. I don't know what month it was, but I assume that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true. I know that's true. So yeah, but that was the reason. So that would be the one way to affect at least my sheet.
How about the consent eligible items on a consent agenda?
That's the other thing I was going to raise is I thought the consent agenda was another one that would not have allowed us to get to the 1 point. I didn't think it's something we will get to in the next, I mean, I think it's something we could potentially get to in the next 3 months. I don't really see it as something we were putting as a high priority on our agenda of things to focus on for the next 3 months. But I think after we get through the next 3 and we're looking at the next year, academic year, that's something we can think about as to whether or not there are things that we can put on to some type of an agreed discussion. Again, that's something for us to think about.
And that, okay. And tracking use of time as well. So do you think there's a possibility of moving to a 1 in the next 6 months? If you utilize a consent agenda?
Yeah, I think my only
And track
question,
use of time.
I think you've got a lot of support from many, I won't speak for the whole board, but from many board members about the idea of a consent agenda. And I think things that'll help us make best use of our time. I think there's a lot of energy for that from many folks. I think the only concern I had is moving to less than 6 board authorized public meetings in a single month. You know, we typically have 2 business meetings, a committee of the whole, policy, finance, and health and safety. So I guess that's 6. So I'm sorry, I have problems counting. But ad hoc will finish its work at the end of the school year. So when that body of work is completed in 3 months, we could absolutely have 6 or fewer. Eve, would you say that into the mic?
This is always going to be a 0.
Well, 6 would not be a 0. So 6 would, it says no more, meeting no more than 6.
Audit. It'll be a 0.
Jeez, Mike.
Sorry. I'm just trying to follow the instructions like I always do.
Yeah, I think that's it. So it might be that in 6 months this goes to a higher than a 0. And I think I wish there were a way for us to capture some credit for things like a consent agenda, because I do think that would be a meaningful step forward, even if we haven't gotten all of the things out of the red yet.
And you'll notice that as you go through the process that you'll start to tick off more and more of the orange and the greens and the blues. And for the community's purpose, yes, we do have things in red that automatically trigger to a 0. But again, those things are things that are really high priority issues. There was another question, or you want to make a statement about this, and then we'll move on.
No, I was just, can you go one more slide? I think one more. Sorry, these are just some definitions, and 2 more slides. And then in 2 more slides, you will see your, your total. So in the last quarter, you've had 25 meetings and have spent 45 hours and 48 minutes, just for a time check, so you have time setting ability. One of the things that I would also consider doing is to help Phyllis and Pat learn how to track use of time as it was mentioned. Let's finish the last 2 at once. You've got unity and trust and the continuous improvement. Let's start. Does anybody have anything different than a 0 on either of those?
I do not. I've got a 0 for both.
0 for both. Is there anything in either of those sections that even if it didn't move you to, well, could you move to the next score, to a higher score in the next 3 to 6 months? And even if you didn't move to a higher score, is there anything you would like to work on?
So I will say, I think the unity and trust one, I could potentially see as moving up based on some of the work we're doing right now with bylaws to establish some procedures and protocols that could have an effect on how we understand and are able to communicate on certain things. And so, I mean, I think that potentially could have some effect of moving us up 1 or 2 spots there.
Anybody else think that you could move up to a 1 potentially in 6 months or a 3? A 1, there are things in the section of 1 that could potentially be coming through in the bylaws. And this is up to you.
Was your question in 6 months, could we be at a 1 on unity and trust?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that on mine too. I think we haven't done the ethics and conflict of interest statement yet, and then signing them during their current term of office. I think as we work through the bylaws piece, that's not, I think, as heavy a lift as some of the other things that we're doing, and I think it feels healthy. So I'm hopeful in 6 months.
So to a 1 by 6 months, does anyone disagree with that in unity and trust? Okay. Mr. Borowski?
I'm just curious for President Lindy real quick. So for that bylaws discussion, since it wasn't on board matters and we talked about potentially being able to do it around this time, is that something we could do when they're done and just kind of go right into that?
I think that's a question for the board. It certainly sounds good to me, and I think it would be, you all put a lot of work into this on Friday and have a lot of things you want to try to move forward, and I think it's special to have them here.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm trying to balance is I know our administration has some other information they want to share with us tonight about budget, and at least touch on the strategic plan for a second. But I think if we could do it in as focused a way as possible, we should try.
Oh, we got a plan. I got a whole thing teed up. Wait till you see it. We're going to get to a 3 tonight.
It's going to be great.
You're welcome.
Great. We heard it here. Okay. So I'll turn it over to Ray. I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Okay. I just want to wrap up with one final point. And first of all, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the diligence in going through this process. The last thing I want to point out is on the screen, we've noted the board's time in meetings. So 45 hours roughly in the last quarter, but 18 hours during the month. Why do you think that's important for the board to monitor its time and its use? Why is that? Why would we put that up, and why would we start to track that? As President Lindy smiles and says, that's a loaded question.
No, I was going to make a joke about like the relationship between me and my wife, and then be a function of that number that's on the
That's a perfect
page.
one.
I mean, I think there's both personal and professional here. Like, and I think that the joke is joking, but it's also comes at a toll on everybody's life outside the board. I think everybody else is choosing to be here because they believe in the work that we're doing and they believe that it's important. The piece I would add, separate from our personal commitment, is just the time of our administrative staff. And so every minute that somebody is in a board meeting, that's a minute they're not doing something else for students. And that's not to say that board meetings aren't important. I think they are important, but I'd like to make sure we're spending our minutes on the highest value activities. And I think based on those numbers, there are some opportunities there for us to improve.
Do you think that the staff is spending 18 hours a month on board activities and board meetings? So you've got board meetings for 18 hours. Do you think the staff is spending 18 hours on board meetings?
Spending vastly more than 18 hours.
The staff is spending vastly more than 18 hours on board meetings. So again, it's when we talk about the board and the board's function, what we're trying to do is say the more streamlined you can make the work of the board, the more you can help staff focus on student outcome so that they're having conversations in their daily and their weekly work that's focused on student outcomes, not focused on what do we need to produce for the board meeting that's coming up, or what do we need to gather for the board meeting that's coming up. Focusing on student outcomes is where you want the staff. And so your ability to do that helps them to do that as well. So thank you all.
I just want to say also, this doesn't include the prep time that we have outside. So any material and all that, it really is a full-time sort of activity. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
And then just real quickly before we go, if you could go to, keep flipping through the slides until there, right there, it's the next one. This is a book that AJ Crable, who is our Director of Governance for the Council, has recently written. I will be providing links, ebook links to everyone for both staff and the board for free so that you all have that resource in your hands in ebook form. And then the next thing I wanted to mention, one more slide, is you might see some people on here that look familiar. There is going to be a session with AJ held by School and School Board partners talking about why school board matters. You might hear a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight. So I can make sure to send you all that link as well so that folks can sign up. It's on May 1st, and that's a free virtual session. Thank you again for having us and for spending all of this time.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah.
And please don't go too far, because I think we might want to enlist your commentary or help in just a moment. But I think, absent some objections from the board, Mr. Moraski, give you just some time to update us on the bylaw piece.
Thank you so much. And while we do that, I'm going to ask Mr. Hoying if he could come to the podium, and Mr. Rob's going to tee some stuff up here. And while we are waiting for our esteemed special guest, is there any way we could get that presentation on board docs for a public? Is that cool? Yeah, awesome. Great. So Dan, Mr. Hoying is going to be here if there are questions. He doesn't have anything formal to present. I'm just going to walk y'all through this. It's a big, meaty document. I just want to give a quick update on how the policy committee has arrived at this point. I'm thinking now that maybe the best thing to do would be that my 4 colleagues who were not at the policy committee meeting on Friday, if by the next policy meeting you could get me your feedback, which is May the 19th at 9 in the morning. And so by the next policy meeting, I mean May 15th. I'm going to explain to you what this document, what you'll see when you look through it. I really, really, really need to thank General Counsel Hoying, Assistant Counsel Ms. Scott, and Kathy Crable in the council's office for getting this together very, very quickly. I think I can speak for the committee while I'm not want to do that, but I think I can and say we had a really excellent conversation on Friday. We're going to reserve our next policy committee meeting, similar to the last one, entirely to this effort. Sans a couple things we may just need to do procedurally. But I'm going to tell you what we have here, let you go home with it, sit with it, and shoot me your feedback so we can look at it again on May 19th. So this is the entire bylaws. This is everything, okay? And the committee is ready to make some recommendations. That we're not going to vote on tonight, obviously, but just so you know that Ms. Bolton, Ms. Weinberg, and myself have all aligned on everything that's in green. The items that are in green are from the Council of Great City Schools. You all should have received their document. If not, Phyllis can get it to you. You will note that we did not include everything that the council suggested. We did include a good amount, however. So my point is, you go through and you see something that you liked from the council that's not in here, please let us know that so we can discuss it on May 19th. Because after that meeting, when we come back to you, we are going to have a formal recommendation, ideally, probably a little more discussion, but ideally, like, this is what we think should go in here. So that's what the green is. Mr. Hoying has gone through. I was just told I need bifocals, but I told my optometrist I prefer the dramatic effect of taking off my glasses. So what you will see is all of the redlined notes have the board member's name next to them. So we have put everything in here that board members suggested that we think we should still leave for discussion. If you don't see something in here that you were extraordinarily married to, we didn't excise anyone's comments right out, but we didn't include everything. There was a lot. And every single one of the policy committee members read all of your feedback. We discussed all of it. We had many witnesses. We have minutes and recordings to prove this. But if you go through here and like, hey, that thing I suggested I thought was really great, then please, again, email and Phyllis Davis. And Phyllis, thank you so much for helping me with this. Phyllis will put all of this together and we'll have your feedback at our next meeting. The only other things I wanted to comment on, just very quickly, we had two choices. The committee's mind was of two mindsets. One was we could go through this line by line, talk about each suggestion one by one, or we could come out with like, I'm just going to use the 3 to 5 because it's on my brain. 3 to 5 like big philosophical esoteric buckets that we need to talk about and really, really iron out. Well, we did both because we're overachievers and awesome. And so, which is why we're going to get to a 3 by the end of this meeting. And so, in addition to this, which I'm not going to bore you with, it's not boring, it's actually really great. The big and unsurprisingly, the overarching philosophical issues that we sort of uncovered were around communication, primarily whether that's staff to board, board to staff, superintendent to staff, board to superintendent. Board super communication was a big one. And then president power, board authority, and communication with the public. So really, those are the two biggest. Board superintendent communication, and you'll see it reflected throughout. So we have no suggestions there. We included everybody's feedback in those parts where that comes up. So board super communication and Council of Great City Schools is like, really? So that was one. And then the other big one again was president and board authority and what that looks like. That also took the form of communication at times, whether it's the board communicating with the public, president communicating on behalf of the board to the public, et cetera. You'll see that reflected. As I'm talking, I need to thank Cindy as well, who attended our meeting and was able to answer a couple questions while we were in the moment. So I'm going to pause. That's where we're at. This is really good, and I appreciate everybody for getting us this. And as I pause, I would love to see if Ms. Weinberger and Ms. Bolton would like to add any commentary to this, because it really was a pretty big team effort.
No, I think that you did a great job of summing everything up. I think we did a good job of incorporating everyone's opinions, and I just think that our colleagues just have to take the opportunity now to look through and provide any additional suggestions. So thank you to my colleagues.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Bolton? Yeah.
Thank you. The only thing I would add to your presentation is that the standing committees need to review their section again. We've been working on that for a couple of months. I don't know that any committee has completed what they were trying to do, but if committee chairs could make sure that you're coming back with what your committee needed to change, especially looking at the previous strategic plan, some of those goals being incorporated, or if you'd like to hand off some of the responsibilities or absorb, that would really help on at least, what is it, about 5 or 6 of the pages.
That's right. Absolutely. And in light of that, our committee refuses to use the abbreviation SADIPCAL.
Now that we have that crucial piece of thank you, Mr. Moreski. Can I just a clarification to make sure I'm following this correctly? So what's helpful for you and your committee is prior to the 19th.
On the 15th, by the 15th.
So by the 15th, board members who are not on the policy committee will have read through this and will have shared with you whether they have like strong agreements or disagreements or any agreements or disagreements or follow-up questions with any of the items that are in here.
That's correct. And then we'll be prepared after then to bring something that is very, very close to final and a recommendation based on that. Because again, a lot of when I say philosophical buckets, I'm being nice. What I'm saying is places of massive disagreement. that clearly there's a philosophical something, which, and again, none of it's surprising to us anyway. And so that's where we're probably we would love to come back at the meeting after the 19th and say, here's the recommendation, and here's like 2 big things we just really need to kind of talk about. And ideally, y'all would be like, yeah, these other things look pretty good. You guys did a good job. Let's really dig into these 2 big buckets that we need to figure out. That would be, I think, the best case scenario.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Other questions for the policy committee before we move on? Anything for Cindy or Ray while we have them, Mr. Moraski, or anybody?
No, I just want, again, thank you. And the document, it's not just Cindy's presence in the meeting, and thank you for answering a couple questions we have, but Cindy and I spoke separate before the meeting and sent me a document that sort of like outlined sort of best practices for doing an activity like this, so thank you for that as well.
Ms. Jones.
Yes, I would like to ask Cindy if she is available to have a conversation with me sometime this week in thinking about this, what we just did today, monitoring and accountability, and trying to incorporate language about what we're not calling SACCOW or whatever. SACCOW. Well, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
That sounds good.
And thank you, Dan. You looked great. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Hoying. Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Okay, so thank you, everybody, for your engagement on our board self-assessment and in moving our bylaw priority forward. We're going to transition to our next item, which may be transportation, or maybe we shared that already during the superintendent's update. We have already shared our transportation update. Knowing that, do board members want to ask anything about the transportation topic just before we keep moving? I don't have anything. I just want to check. Ms. Bolton.
I'm just going to repeat the need for the board to see both the dollar amounts, but most particularly all of the different kinds of transportation. I know y'all are working on that. The van piece, the ambulance piece, the driver, all those special kinds of things, just so we get a better handle on how much money and how many kids, unique riders are in each of those phases as we start to look at the cost on the budget.
Thank you. So we did provide just the unique numbers, and now the treasurer's office has added the dollar amounts to those.
Oh, okay.
They've worked with it got sent today for communication back and forth, and so then we should be able, I'm hoping by the end of the week, to send it to the board.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other transportation questions? Okay, thank you very much. So moving right along, we're on item 3, which is our budget update.
So I had one slide, since we've done the larger presentations at Town Hall and at Finance Committee. I just want to give a really quick update of where we are, or what we've accomplished. There you go. So since the last time we talked about budget in a public setting, we've had the Town Hall on the 13th, where we talked about the budget target explanation, went into a lot of detail. It's an interactive so people could see the impact of the budget or the cash balance as we change the size of the budget. And we talked a lot about the central office process. I repeated that the very next day at the Budget Growth and Finance Committee, went into a lot more conversation and detail. We started the Alview training for all the central office budget managers. And to date, we've had 46 people trained, and they're still going. Last week, I've lost time because I spent a week in Columbus. On the 17th, I met with the CAS leadership to make sure that all their concerns, questions, comments were addressed, and it was a very good meeting. The budgets are due in the system to be completed by May 1st, because then we have a whole series of quality control review checks to go through to make sure somebody didn't forget to budget mileage or for office supplies or whatnot. So we have a couple of days to do that. And then we'll consolidate all the files, get it to the ELT where we'll start balancing. Because in 30 years with this district, the budget ask has never been smaller than the budget target. And so we always have to make some spending decisions or investment decisions. And we hope to come back to the board on the 20-something. I didn't put that on there. The 22nd, we're hoping to come back to the board to do a public presentation about this is all the data, this is where we stand, these are some early recommendations while we continue to do the work. So for May 22nd, you'll get an updated, consolidated, full central office and as many as the federal fund data that we can provide. That was it so far.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. I appreciate it. So,
I don't want to be the superintendent.
so we have a lot of hard work that is underway. I want to thank everybody, our finance committee, our board, our superintendent, our treasurer for all of this. Are there any questions that people would like to ask this evening? Ms. Bolton.
Just one as a follow-up to, I think, a memo or whatever we got today or yesterday regarding the legal case regarding transportation. That's what up in Franklin County or where. Interested to know what our plans are and appreciated that update. So if we, general counsel or superintendent or treasurer.
Thank you. General counsel is coming at this time, but when we received the information and shared it out, it was recognized that there was an opportunity for us to make a request of ODE to return funds that were taken from us last year. And so we are in the process of doing that at this time because, as you know, we've been following that information, and that's why we were able to share it as soon as we received it. So I'll turn it to the general counsel.
Yeah, there's no final decisions in those cases, but both in the case filed in Franklin County, also Toledo, the magistrate has recommended a permanent injunction stopping ODE from penalizing those two school districts, Columbus and Toledo, for similar transportation issues we experienced last year, and stopping ODE from enforcing those fines. You know, and there's also litigation pending in Dayton along the same lines. So the idea would be to reach out to ODE and say, to avoid litigation with Cincinnati, we'd request that those funds be returned to CPS as well.
Even though we didn't sign on, we could still benefit from that legal action.
So this was not a class action or individual lawsuit. But no, we didn't file our own.
Treasurer Wagner, did you have a?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody or inform you if you didn't know, the reason that the transportation fines are such a problem for the district is that they're not fining us for the children that we missed or didn't provide service to. They're fining us for the total cost of the day's transportation. So they take the total transportation cost, divide it to the number of days, and if we were out of compliance for 10 days, they take that entire value for the day. So we're not just being punished for the children that we didn't provide service to, we're being punished for the entire district for a day's worth of transportation. And for us, that was $2.6 million last year. So that would be really helpful to get it back.
Thank you.
Others, Mr. Craig.
I want to piggyback on what Board Member Bolton said, though, and I think one of the reasons why this is also really crucial is that what they were taking money from us for is on some of these schools where we did not have a way to ascertain those students who we didn't know needed transportation to the schools. And so in some ways, the state is punishing us for not being told by a parent or student that I need a ride to school, or when they're not when they're one of our non-pubs or others. And so I think this is, again, an example of how we are having to interact with the state, who is not necessarily putting up bridges for us to be able to be successful, but instead putting up barriers, public schools being able to achieve things for their students in the district. So.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Are there any other questions or comments or discussion on our update on the budget this evening? Okay, hearing none, then we're going to keep on moving. And our next item on the agenda here, I believe, is for strategic plan, but I just want to get my right attachment open here, everybody. Great. So moving on to our last presentation, which is one of the big 5 3-month priorities for the board, which is the strategic plan. I've summarized a little bit about this at our last meeting, but we took a big step forward in this direction on strategic plan at the end of last calendar year when we adopted the district's goals and guardrails. These have come up quite a bit this evening, but together these reflected the participation of thousands of community members and our board's effort to codify the vision of the community that it has for student outcomes, as well as the values that they most want to be honored. At a work session then the very next month in January, we ratified a strategic planning process that was going to have 2 parts. The first was a superintendent-led process taking place this spring that would map out how the district would achieve those goals while honoring those guardrails. The second was a process with the board to update our district's vision, mission, and long-term forecast. We decided to work with the Alma group that helped us with the superintendent search on that process. The first part of that process is moving along, and we've received some nice updates on that from our superintendent. And last week, both in the CAL meeting, I think we teased, and then on Thursday came out and it has been posted to board docs since then, our first update on the Alma part of that process. So you should see on the screen, this is the same doc that's on board docs, just an overview of that timeline and that process. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but you'll see that it focuses on the board discussion on vision, mission, and future forecast, and on community engagement. You'll see on that first page the 4 different pieces of the work. You'll see on the second page a timeline of activities. And so what I wanted to do here is just make sure that everybody had this document, has a chance to ask any questions about it. I might ask my colleague Eve if there's anything she wants to start sharing first, and then that everybody has a window into that timeline. I think likely the first engagement point that board members will have is between today and May 12th. Each board member will have a one-on-one on these topics with the firm. And then by May 22nd, this is all on the second page there, we'll have that first discussion after those one-on-ones have been completed. So, Member Bolden, is there anything that you want to add or give voice to on this?
No, just for the benefit of the public and our own memories, this is really about those 3 things, and that's the vision and mission, and also the forecasting of the future. And we encourage folks to participate and encourage the board to to take it to heart and muscle in and really see if we can move beyond our current vision and mission and re-envision our future.
Thank you, Member Bolden. So I think for the purposes of this evening, I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions about, we don't have Monica with us tonight, but if there's a question that I don't know the answer to, I'll make sure we get an answer tracked down. People have any questions about the timeline or the work product? Dr. Moffett?
So I just have a question for clarity, because this is being done, I think we need to make it very clear, this is being done a little differently for the community than it has been done in the past, so that expectations are a little bit more level set. Is Alma, just in looking at the timeline and activities, Alma is going to review the previous information from the superintendent search, and then are they going to engage in listening sessions with the community outside of board member input, or how does that look? So that we can inform the community of what to expect. How many sessions? I'm looking at the timeline. It looks like it's 10 days from May the 12th through May the 22nd. And it looks like they're, from here as written, they're only just going to be reviewing. It doesn't look like they're going to be on the week of May 22nd, they're going to be reviewing with community members. So are they going to be holding listening sessions? How does that work? What does this look like?
Ms. Bolton, do you want to speak to that one?
It's my understanding that there will be other public sessions. I think they're limited, since we've been doing for the last couple of years, a lot of that, plus we did it for the goals and guardrails, but they will be doing some limited community engagement. My hope is that part of that limited community engagement will ask the people back that came for the goals and guardrails, because I think we told them that we thought that we would be having them back for the vision and the mission piece. And other issues, I think that's after they meet with us, and I think after they review the data that was once generated, I think then we'll have a better idea. And I know there was some interest in doing some of the school communities as well. So my understanding, there will be some community engagement, mostly the folks that have already been with us for goals and guardrails, plus whatever is generated from our discussions as to what we think we still need to see engaged.
Okay, Rob, if you could put that back on the screen, just the timeline and activities. I just want to make it really clear because as honestly, to be completely transparent as a board member, this is different than what I anticipated myself. I didn't understand, first of all, how we were doing two separate ones. But then also I thought our listening sessions from the board's perspective regarding the vision and mission would be a little bit more engagement with the community around that, as it mimicked somewhat how it was in the past. It didn't have to look the same way, but I really wasn't expecting that there would be as limited as what is being presented here. But having said that, and this is where we are, I think it's just very important to ensure the community of what they're going to get versus it's not going to look like what it has been, and it's not going to look like what administration has done. It's going to be conducted on a limited basis from Alma, right?
I would agree that it's a limited, we basically have 4 weeks less than I think we planned on having, but more particularly, I think there's been more public engagement in this other element that we've been working on the work committees and whatever than perhaps we anticipated. But I also think that with this very narrow scope, which is interestingly enough broad in its meaning, we can really have that kind of focused opportunity as long as the board gives great direction to Alma and we make it clear where we still have these needs to be answered.
I agree. I just wanted to make it clear that people are expecting, they're expecting a strategic plan session, and unfortunately, so many are going by memory. So I just want to make it very clear, it's not going to look like what it has been, and it is going to be different, and how it's going to be different, that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Are there any other questions that folks would like to ask about what comes next on this engagement? Okay, so then we're going to keep moving. Thanks everyone for our presentations and discussion section this evening. I do think that's been the largest and meatiest part of our meeting this evening. So we'll move to resolutions. Mr. Morosky, this looked popular earlier. Do you want to make our first resolution?
It'd be my pleasure to present a resolution requesting a waiver for alcohol use at Kilgore Elementary School by the Kilgore Parent and Teacher Association. I present. The resolution is written.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Jones. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky.
Just to, yeah, it's clarification, just to be clear. My brother, Stephen Pryor, was here earlier, and he likes to give me a hard time. And just to be clear, this is for the 5K and Carnival hosted by the PTA, and it is not for children. Just in case anybody did not know that Brother Pryor was my friend, and that was a goof. So that's all.
We thought that was your own personal alcohol session.
It's just to be clear.
Well, with that context, I feel like we can now vote on it. Any other discussion or questions from Mr. Morosky? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton? Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffett? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. We have a second resolution. Would you present that, Ms. Weinberg?
Yes. So on behalf of Cincinnati Public Schools, a resolution authorizing the 2023-2024 membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association, OHSAA, and I present this resolution as written.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffett? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. We have a third and final resolution from Mr. Morosky.
Thank you. And I will ask Mr. Hoying again, if he could come up this time, I will actually, I got something for Mr. Hoying. I have a resolution amending board policy 5410, promotion, academic acceleration, or no, just promotion and retention. It should not say academic acceleration. I present the resolution as written.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Any discussion?
Yeah, actually, I am going to make an amendment to it because the one we have still has academic acceleration on it. So I'll do that at the end. But Mr. Hoying, I know there's like a couple sentences that were left off of the first one you all saw last meeting when everyone agreed that we would take this back for one more glance. They were a part of it, the one we presented in recommending to you, but I just want to highlight them. And then Ms. Weinberg had an addition in the 11th hour that was awesome and wanted to give her an opportunity to let you know. Minimal changes, but I think substantive. So Dan, could you just remind us what those few things were?
Yeah, the only changes were recommended and by CFT actually and Karen Imbis to make the policy consistent with the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
And it related to the audit process if there's disagreement between the parent and the school. Those were the changes suggested and adopted by the policy.
Thanks, Mr. Hoying. And then Ms. Weinberg, you brought up a topic that Ms. Bolton and I both thought was excellent. So if you could.
Yes, just really briefly, it was a topic that was brought up into the community. I think it was either by a parent or a teacher in terms of if a student has a repeated, trying to hold them retention, having that issue. And we talked about it and decided that we needed to add extra verbiage into the policy as well to address that.
And that verbiage is, quote, the superintendent will develop procedures to ensure that any student who is retained more than once shall have an individual academic plan that is designed to enable the student to recover and advance through the curriculum. So I just wanted, and if there are any questions, then I'm going to make an amendment to my own motion, if I may.
Go ahead.
I would just amend that the policy 5410 read promotion and retention.
It is your motion, Mr. Morosky, so it now reads as amended. Any discussion on the amended resolution? Treasurer Wagner, were you able to capture the amendment? Okay.
The title is reflected correctly in the policy. It was just in the resolution, and that was on us.
Okay.
Cool.
Great. Any other discussion? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Bolton? Aye. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffett? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. We're now moving to superintendent of schools. Do we have any retirements this evening?
We do have several retirements today. We actually have 25. So I'm going to read the list off. It's for certificated staff. So first up, we have Regina S. Abatovi. And again, I do apologize if I am saying anyone's last name incorrectly. A teacher from Aiken High School. We have Susan E. Biltz, a teacher from Taft High School. Betty J. Carthon, an intervention specialist from Roseland Condon School. Myrna Cora Cabin, a teacher from Dater High School. Mary E. Crank, a teacher from SCPA. Peggy R. Davis, a teacher from Roberts Academy. Paul Jean, a teacher from Carson School. Jeffrey Lazar, a teacher from Walnut Hills High School, which used to be my teacher. Amanda D. Lees, an intervention specialist from SCPA. Jennifer B. Martini, a teacher from Kilgore School. Maxine Moore, a teacher from Riverview East Academy. Rebecca M. Thank you, Napergaw, there, a teacher from Virtual High School. Raymond E. Nephew, a teacher mentor for teacher evaluation. Patricia Ann New, a teacher from Aiken High School. Jacqueline L. Newberry, a teacher at Sands Montessori School. William S. Norman, a teacher from SCPA. Maria Onan, a teacher from College Hill Fundamental Academy. Mary Beth Path, a teacher from Midway School. Alfred L. Rizzo, a teacher from SCPA. Randolph Greg Saunders, a teacher from Dater High School. Catherine A. Shannon, an intervention specialist, Auxiliary St. Mary. Christine Siciliano, intervention specialist, auxiliary at St. Boniface. Barbara E. Stewart, a teacher from Walnut Hills High School. Pamela D. Taylor, a teacher from Withrow University High School. And last but not least, David R. Tiffany, a teacher from Taft High School. So we definitely want to thank the 25 individuals for their service and their commitment to the district and for all that they've done. We give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. I would just add that Mr. Lazar was my chemistry teacher as well,
Yes.
and he was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Do we have a recommendation or a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent this evening?
Board President, I actually have one correction.
Yes, Superintendent.
Do I do that now? Or-
Let's do the motion, and then we'll get it seconded, and then we'll get an amendment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We have some discussion and an amendment from our superintendent.
Yes, there is actually a typographical error on page 7. The amount there under Reading Specialist PLC Leaders should be $1,200, not $12,000. So I do want to make sure that that gets noted and corrected.
That's a good correction. Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Craig, you were the motion maker, I think, on that. Is that a friendly amendment?
That is a friendly amendment.
The motion is now on the floor as amended. Any other discussion on the motion? Ms. Bolton?
Just to point out, if we could, again, what was mentioned earlier this evening is a historic effort on the part of the district, and that is the adoption of the, it's in there. I think it's in the adoption of the Montessori curriculum. We started Montessori's in 1975. We were the first public school system to have Montessori schools, first one to create a Montessori high school, and the first district to create a neighborhood Montessori school. And it is crucial to our growth that we prepare ourselves to build the third Montessori high school very, very soon. But this is remarkable, another area where we lead.
Thank you, Member Bolton. Any other discussion or comments on the superintendent's recommendations? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes, I will abstain from certificated personnel item G, but yes on everything else.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes, so we're now on the treasurer's report. There are two issues here to clarify. The first is people should be looking at a revised treasurer's report. You received a hard copy of that today. I also understand, Ms. Wagner, that there's an addendum that we need to add to the treasurer's report.
That's correct.
We'll do the same thing we did with the superintendent. We'll motion it, we'll second it, and then we'll have the...
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. In discussion, do you want to talk about the proposed addendum, Ms. Wagner?
Yeah, so I'll actually read it to you. The Board of Education we're asking for authorization for the treasurer to enter into an option purchase agreement, the property located at 4324 Homer Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45227, not to exceed $3,150,000. The district is seeking funding approval to use ESSER funds for this purchase, and the agreement is conditional upon receiving Ohio Department of Education's approval. We're just waiting on their answer, but I feel confident.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. As motion maker, Ms. Bolton, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, it's a very friendly amendment. Waited for years to hear that.
So we have a friendly amendment, and the
Nobody
treasurer's
accepted.
report is on the table as amended. Any other discussion or questions on the treasurer's report? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffett? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
I recuse on the addendum, but vote yes on the rest of the report. Thank you very much. So we've now completed our report of the treasurer, and we are into the back half of our meeting. We're going to start with board meeting dates for 2024. I know this recommended calendar came from the board office. I think, are they looking for approval of that calendar this evening? So looking for approval of the board calendar. So any questions or comments or concerns? I don't have any, but I wanted to see if the board or the superintendent or the treasurer have any. Ms. Bolton?
Do we have to run this by Ray and Cindy?
Is this listed on board docs? We don't have a copy of what you're looking at.
I assumed that it was. It is not on, and so you've not seen a copy of it yet? Aha, okay. So I think my question would be for our board staff. It looks like the superintendent and the treasurer have not seen a copy of this yet. I'd like to wait until they've had a chance to take a look at it. Are there any concerns with us just moving this to our next business meeting, which should be on May 8th? Phyllis is shaking her head no. Great. Any colleagues have any concerns? We just give our administrators a chance to see what we're asking of them first. Great. So we'll move that to our next meeting agenda. Next, we have a board matters item from Ms. Bolton.
Yes. And I will not take very long. Increasingly, I hear from the community concerns regarding safety issues that are within our buildings, but most particularly on our campuses and near and around our campuses. And I know that the administration is working hard on it. I also know that there are some schools and neighborhoods that would really appreciate some kind of engagement opportunity with the school district and school leadership to talk about those concerns that they have, and would like to suggest that that kind of engagement occur. I know people won't be surprised for me to throw in again my view about the 1 mile versus 1.25. But I do think we could probably have some community engagement that would be helpful in some targeted neighborhoods. And I believe the superintendent's the best one to figure out which those would be, besides the ones we might have heard from neighborhoods is one. I also think that, again, to the point that we've talked about with city council, I really do think there's interest on city council among members anyway, and it looks like we're going to maybe be at odds about some things with them, perhaps about the abatement, but I do think we have to reinvigorate the discussion about school safe zones and school zones itself, not only on arrival, but dismissal. And I mean all of our schools, high schools and our elementary schools and our preschools. The community is very, I would say, very trusting and engaged with us about wanting the best for our students, our teenagers, and our kids. But I think that we need to re-engage the city council and the city administration, especially in that securing a zone and talking in terms of the walkability, all these things that our consultants talked about, the modes of transportation, and that the board policy talks about, whether it's cars, whether it's pedestrian, whether it's bike, whatever it is. I really think it would serve us well, but more particularly and more importantly, serve our families and our kids. It's the kind of thing we did when we had that terrible spree of pedestrian injuries and concerns. We went right to the communities and the neighborhoods, and the city council did the same, and things all of a sudden got taken care of, whether it was traffic lights or whether it was crosswalks. I just think, and I would like the superintendent, I don't mean to make this an assignment, but as a discussion that you could think about and figure out how to pursue it. If anybody has particular places, I can think of 2 schools in particular that said that they worry greatly and they have to shut down at the end of a school day and worry about those kids getting home. Things haven't gotten safer in our town recently. I'd like the superintendent to kind of think about how we can proceed, but I'm just bringing that from the community, and I think there's other board members too that have heard similar concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Ms. Weinberg.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Bolton. I wanted to just agree with you as well, and just hearing from particular individuals in the community as well about our school safety. So thank you so much for bringing that up, and I look forward to hearing anything else that Superintendent Wright would like to add to that.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Anything, Superintendent, you want to ask our chair?
I would just say thank you for the feedback. I know that this is something that's been top of mind for all of us. I did share in my updates to the board today that we did have a meeting on Friday, actually, with the mayor and the city manager talking about some of these very same topics. And so I think collectively we are all engaged and really interested in making sure that we have a broader conversation, because to your point, while school is school is school, and there are things that happen inside the school building, all too often what's happening with our students is starting in the community and bringing its way into school. And there's also the concern about what's happening once students leave. And so together we want to make sure that we own all of that. So thank you for the ask, and we'll continue to keep us updated around the information that is being provided for us, and as we're working with the city as well.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Mr. Craig, followed by Dr. Moffitt.
I just wanted to reiterate also, I think the leaving the school time is also one of the most difficult for our district, because we have so many schools that are on major roads. And when they're on major roads, it's not just about the students leaving, but it's also about folks who are traveling to and from work, from folks who are coming in. I know we're seeing a lot of the struggles really being all of these students leaving at once from the school. How do we manage that? And so I know there's a conversation that you were having with regards to how we're doing our transportation going forward. I think that's something we're keeping in mind. I think that's something as a board we can work to establish those relationships with the city to keep posturing that. I know it's something we talked about the last time we met with them, and I think it's something we'll continue to keep talking about. But what I really do think it's an opportunity for us is there spaces where we can identify those places where it's just definitely going to be a problem, where it's always going to be a problem no matter what time they get out of school, no matter what time they're leaving the school. And then are there community partners and community folks around those schools that can help us provide that safe space with the city? I think this is a great opportunity for a partnership, but it's, again, also very limited in what we would do as a board, and as far as setting that goal, setting that space for us to have that achievement. Not so much as something we do as a long-term fix of everything in the world, because we're not going to fix all the ills that are causing a lot of these problems. We're not going to fix the gun violence that people seem to resort to right away. We're not going to fix the poverty and these other issues. But what can we make sure that as we're monitoring, as we're thinking about, as we're going along, that we're just paying respect to those facts?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Dr. Moffitt?
So I will say that.
Can I go to Dr. Moffitt, then we'll come.
I just want the sanctity of the school space that once existed a generation ago.
Yeah.
Is something we have to do.
Thank you. Dr. Moffitt.
So I brought this up last meeting. I don't know if you all remember, but we talked about, in working with Vice Mayor Kearney, we wanted to have our joint meeting in May. Seems kind of congested, but we do have an upcoming joint meeting between the city and CPS. And so he brought up that perhaps that would be something that we could talk about in light of all of the things that are going on. So I asked the board members to look at some calendar dates in May. that we could potentially, it would be our turn to host. And so we took over the Healthy Neighborhoods meeting for the city, and this time it would kind of be our decision, our meeting. So we talked about May, but if it can't be May, maybe early June, but that's something that we wanted to have that discussion. Even if we can't fix it, we could definitely entertain a conversation for the public to help weigh in on possible solutions, possible information that we don't have. I do know one of our schools, it was recommended by the resource officer that they leave by 5 o'clock. So a late start time, getting out at 3:30 or 4, it definitely impacts them. And those are things that I think the city needs to hear as well, that we need to be cognizant of too. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you very much. Anything else in this one? We're going to move on to number 3. Moving on to number 3 is from Dr. Moffitt.
So that is mine, and it's superintendent travel out of the district. I would just like for us to have a discussion. I know that we've kind of brought the topic up via email, but this is the place for us to discuss things. Can we align on how we're handling when our superintendent is out of the district? Can we align on that? Are we going to just do that by email? How are we going to be notified?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Can you say more?
What's the process now? When the superintendent is out of the district, what's the process?
My understanding, and board members, please correct me if I've got this wrong, is that in the contract and in the bylaws, the superintendent notifies the board president. But I'm often wrong about things, and please tell me if I've got this wrong too.
What?
I think, Ms. Bolden?
I believe that's been the tradition, the practice, excuse me.
And Mr. Craig?
But that's with, like, when the superintendent's out with leave. So if the superintendent's doing business of the district outside, right? If I'm correct, at least how the first bylaws are written.
I think our superintendent just has been pretty good about letting me know if she's going to be out for anything, whether it's for like leave or for a conference.
So then that leads me to my number 4. Can the board be notified of that? So if you're notified of that, can the board, what's the process of notifying the board? Because we discussed having like some sort of weekly update from the president or something like that, but it kind of went nowhere. So can you notify the entire board of whatever you know?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think my intention has been to do that already, but I think if there's some that I've missed, I certainly take responsibility for that, and I'm happy to make sure that that message gets communicated to others too. That's no problem.
I think this is really just my ask of what is the process, because we've not formally talked about the process. We have things in place, but then there's no process of how they get, how the next step happens. And there's been times when, and maybe I'll just speak for myself, I haven't had information that was either sent to administration or sent to the president and it didn't get passed out. So I just want us to formalize the process so that I understand what to expect.
Sure. I mean, what I'm hearing, in absent objection from others, is that if the superintendent has let me know that she's going to be someplace out of district, could be, as Mr. Craig mentions, for a leave, or it could be for a conference. I'm happy to share that with everybody. Is that the piece that's most helpful?
Yes.
Any concerns with that? I certainly don't have any. Great. Okay. Was that your second one also?
So my number 4 is information that comes to the board president that gets, what is going to be our process with getting that information to the board members? If it's to the president that represents the board, what's that process to getting to the board members? Is it just, what's the process?
I think maybe an example would be helpful. I'm trying to make sure that anything that comes to me as we're talking about in a meeting. But if there's something that hasn't come through, I hear the piece on travel. If there's another one too, I'm certainly happy to make sure, anything that people need, they have access to.
So I think, okay, then when it comes to the president, if someone sends an email about whatever, and it comes to the board president, it goes, you pass it to the board members, correct?
What I do is anytime a constituent contacts the board, they get a response from me and I CC Phyllis. And then our process is Phyllis then BCCs, or I don't know, she may put it in the CC line, I'm not sure, but that goes out to everybody else too.
I just want to formalize the process, that's all. I wanted to hear what the process was. So now I understand.
Great. Ms. Weinberg?
I'm good.
You sure?
I was going to clarify something, but it's okay.
Anything else on this topic? Item 5, Mrs. Weinberg.
It's not showing up on my board docs thing as.
This is the magnet school qualifications and timeline updates.
Thank you. I was going to actually hold that off for inquiries and updates. We can just wait a couple of seconds.
We can come back to you for inquiries and updates.
Thank you.
We are now on inquiries and updates. Mrs. Weinberg, you're up.
Okay. I actually have 3 different things. So I'm going to start with that one first, then I'll go to my second and my third. But the first thing that I wanted to ask, and this is just really for the superintendent as well, if any of my other colleagues want to comment, just wanted to get a process on, I know we received a couple of emails about magnet schools and the lottery and being updated on the time frame, and I know the time frame was extended. Moving forward, as you're looking into next year, I know the complaint among families is that they're put into different predicaments in terms of not knowing where their children will be. Just wanted to know, is there a plan to change that process or review that process to see how it can be a little bit more sufficient?
Thank you. So I would say yes, in terms of just looking at the response for the information. As was shared with me and as I shared with the board as a follow-up to those that asked the question, last year the magnet information was sent out April the 29th. So what has been the normal, as normal can be for what's been shared with me by the team that's been responsible for that, is what has been communicated is that it would be by, generally the goal is to send the information out by the end of April. I think the disconnect is the website actually referenced a number of weeks, while practice had actually been by the end of April. So following up with the team just to make sure that it's more streamlined. We are a bit ahead of the curve now, and so the information is actually being sent out to families, so they should actually receive it before the end of the month. So it puts it about a week earlier than they started getting it before. But of course, it also depends on how long it takes the postal service to get the information there as well. So it is something that we're reviewing for next year so that we can assist with the streamlining. I don't know if it'll be early enough for some of the schools that have different cutoff dates. I know that the team suggested that that was one of the reasons that they looked at the dates before, but it is something that we will explore.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I go into my second one?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then the next thing is I had a couple of questions for our legislative liaison, and I do see Mr. Kearney is here today. I'm not sure if he wants to come down. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. I do know that we received an email from the Ohio School Board Association with just different updates on different legislation that is going into the House. And there are a couple of bills that I guess they are having a hearing tomorrow. And I'm going to speak for myself that I was not aware of that until today. Just wanted to know if there was an opportunity for us to possibly get that information ahead of time. Didn't know if you wanted to come down and say anything on that.
While we're waiting there, Mrs. Weinberg, do you want to do your third one?
Yes, and the third one is, I think I brought this up months ago about us doing our board meeting in the community. Remember that one, everybody?
I do, yes.
So at some point, I just wanted to remind everyone that we still need to kind of schedule that and put that out into the community for our community members and family members that would like to attend.
We did
remember
talk
the board
about
meeting that we
this
talked
at
about.
a past board meeting, and I'm trying to remember exactly where we left it.
It's on with us.
It may be scheduled.
It was left with us.
Oh, it's left with you?
Okay.
Yeah, it was left with us. And so actually we have that on our agenda to bring back to share whether we're looking at doing that for a May meeting or one of the June meetings, or if we would look at doing that once a quarter starting in August. So that's really, we have the dates, we have the schools identified, and that's just on my list to talk to you about tomorrow.
That's perfect. I knew that we had brought it up. I just wanted to have an update. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. We had a question for Mr. Kearney. Mr. Kearney, would you hit the button that has the mouth?
The button,
There
right?
we go.
Hitting the
You got
wrong
it.
button. Thank you, Ron. To the chair, to Ms. Weinberg, I don't know that there was a chance to testify tomorrow. There's always an opportunity for us to provide you with information. My understanding is that we're using a different procedure, and I've been, to the best of my ability, following that procedure. But if the board would like something different, I'm willing to do whatever it is that you would care for.
No, I think the question that I just had was if you had any information to provide on this particular Senate Bill 1 in terms of for the hearing that is going to be tomorrow. I was just curious about that.
I don't have any information, any inside information or anything that was not reported in the media. So no, I do not.
Okay.
Ms. Jones?
I don't know if there's a kind way to say this, but I'm gonna say it. I'm pretty frustrated right now. I think that there are things on our agenda, and everybody has a right to put things on the agenda, but it feels a little bit like micromanaging. And in this situation, we get information from OSBA and OENA and all these legislative platforms, and we get them in enough time for people to read them. We oftentimes, and it has been historical, that we get notices from the state later, and that you have been very good about informing us of things that are pending, and oftentimes we're in a rush to respond or whatever. So I would urge my colleagues that when they get that information, that if there is some interest in having a follow-up, that they immediately direct those to the superintendent, who is the contact now with the legislative liaisons, yourself, and we can prioritize that. And one of the things that we are still working on is processing in the CAL meetings for how we get these reports and get this information early. So I just had to say that, because it just, we have 5 agenda items on here, and I don't know if that was a board matter or an inquiry or update, but we do have time to do more planful presentations around this, and we have to work with that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Kearney, as well. You always typically have the information for us. I just know that when I opened my email up today, it was for the week of April the 17th that there was an update given. And so, being that I saw that you were in the audience, I figured that I would ask a couple of questions regarding if there was anything important that we should know. And in terms of for an inquiry update, I thought that it was appropriate for this particular meeting. So thank you.
Inquiries and updates are typically addressed to the superintendent or other board members. We typically don't ask people.
Thank you, Board Member Jones and President Lindy. In terms of if we need to clarify a particular process for that, I would be open to having that discussion as well.
Sounds like a great time to finish our review of our bylaws.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Kearney, for all your work with our superintendent. We appreciate that. And do we have any other inquiries or updates this evening?
I don't have anything for you, Mr. Kearney. You're good. I do have a couple of inquiries and updates. And then I'm going to address something that you said that's kind of in my crawl. But I have had a question from some of our Spanish-speaking families regarding interpreters at board meetings. Again, we brought this up before regarding ASL and interpreters. Can you tell me what the process is so that we have coverage for our ELL families that would like to come to meetings and share during hearing of the public, but they do not feel comfortable? We did have one parent, which I was really glad that she did speak up, but there have been questions asked of me about comfortability. Is there going to be an interpreter there at every meeting? Do they have to schedule to come to the meeting or let people know ahead of time, which is really not equitable? So I'd like to have some clarification about our ASL and our Spanish interpreters, if possible, coming to the meetings.
Thank you. When this was shared before, I understood that the board office is the one that did the scheduling for the ASL, for the interpreters to attend, and that's what was shared previously. So we were under the impression that since that was discussed then, that would be an expectation from the board office, unless that's been a change. If it has been a change, that's not been communicated with us.
Is that for ASL and EL and our Spanish speaking? Okay, so if we could get some clarification on that and then share that with our families so that they could come. Another question that I had was regarding, I was tagged in a post that parents are trying to align and form a group, which is commendable, but we do have a parent district champion. So is it possible that you could just speak a little bit more about that position so that parents know that they can contact our district champion if they have any questions, and they don't have to recreate the wheel? We do have a parent district champion, so can you speak to that?
Sure. I know that our parent district champion is out right now on leave, but that is a role that is done through the Office of Family and Community Engagement. I think that that's one place to get assistance and get support. We also have 3 open public meetings every month where families are welcome to attend those meetings as well. We have full access to really all of us in terms of being able to reach out and see what the additional questions or concerns are. I think the post that you might be referencing, I'm not sure. There was a post that was shared with me as well that a family is also looking at doing some organizing around some of the concerns they have for the district. However, in trying to do research on the name, it was not a name that we could find of a parent in our district. So if there is anyone that has contact, we do definitely want to make certain that parents are able to access us. They're able to get all of their questions answered. And as soon as our parent champion returns, she does consistent meetings with families. She does office hours throughout the week as well. She does them in the morning, she does them in the afternoons, and she also visits schools. So we can make sure that it is on our website as well for how to get the access for that. But if there's someone that actually has access to the families, we will definitely reach out to them to see how we can offer assistance.
Thank you. I did tag the parent district champion, Mrs. Thomas, in that post, and then I've had many people reach out to say, hey, I didn't even know we had that. So I wanted to clarify that. I did tag her and she did reach out. My next question is regarding summer scholars transportation. Would you be able to clarify for families if there is transportation for summer scholars and how that looks?
Yes, there is transportation for summer scholars. We closed the application process just a couple of weeks ago, I believe. So we're in the process right now of aligning that transportation. We're following the same guidance and guidelines that we use for transportation for the school year. And so that would continue moving into the summer. I think along with that, it's also important that and I know the question will come up after the fact, but everything that we're doing right now for summer, we're preparing that for the students that have actually applied. And so it will be important that we make certain that those are the students that we are serving. We have some provisions for students that are rising 11th and 12th graders, just in case they don't get the coursework that they feel that they need. But those students would be on the Metro. They would use their Metro passes to do that. And we have several students that have signed up to do summer learning virtual as well. And also the summer, I believe the transportation information is on the FAQs on our website for summer scholars. It was actually placed there when we released the summer scholars information and application.
Thank you. I'm gonna hold off on my comment regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moffat. Any other inquiries or updates? Mr. Morawski.
Yeah, I have a bunch of updates, and I'll go quick. One of them was actually on the ASL. So as the board assigned a while ago, Phyllis have been working with our friends who used to provide that service for us before. You may recall that it was free. It is not free any longer. It's $35 an hour with a minimum of 2 hours. And so I would leave this, I don't know what all the finances look for things like this, but to the superintendent and the treasurer, Ms. Davis has the info. I was going to give that to y'all to get with her today. So there that is. Update number 2. I'm sorry, I've talked too much tonight. Update number 2 from the Cincinnati Recreation Commission, Reverend Dwight Young from Block Ministries and his number 1 in command at Horses on the Hill. It's a facility in Price Hill, doing equine therapy. I worked with Dwight in a former life doing organizing in Lower Price Hill. He's a good man. He editorial comment. They worked with 920 of our kids up there. I had no idea. I knew this place existed. I did not know that it existed on that kind of magnitude. Every single school in that area has a touch point there. So we're talking Carson, Reese, Price, Roberts, Covedale, et cetera, Euler. The only questions I asked of the woman who directs the program is if they do this in concert with the teachers. So I'm always interested in, our partnerships that actually work with the teachers and are part of the curriculum. As we know through research, I think, like, that's the only way this stuff works. And they do. It's pretty cool. I want to let you all know about it. If you want to go get a visit, you can hit me up. I can make that happen real easy. Houses, notably in that area of the community, have risen in value 25% just since they put in this facility. And the reason they came to us at the CRC is they asked for us to allow them to use some more land. And in so doing, we would have different access. I mean, they're not paying us for it. And we said, sure. Lastly, from the CRC update, unsurprisingly, we do need more lifeguards again. So I'll be getting with superintendent like last year. Here's some info to get out to folks, and we'll get through Mark and we'll get it out to our people here. We are able to open 10 pools at this point. And last year at this same time, it was 8 pools. So that's notable. And we're going to be looking at and working with the YMCA and Jorge Perez on figuring out where there might be communities, because they can't open all theirs either. So where there might be communities where they can serve more, we can serve more and try to be smarter about it. So that's really great. Next, some green stuff. We've been we've been talking about some green initiatives here today, and you'll have something in your inbox when you get home from Ms. Davis that was sent to me about a potential resolution about going green by 2035. It's the students in a lot of our schools have been getting really excited about this electrify everything. There is sample board resolutions committing to electrifying all buildings by 2035 or sooner. There's 6 other things. I just put those in front of you so you can check it out and know that I'll be talking about this again, but this is your little appetizer for that. So get ready. And then lastly, most excitingly, actually these are all pretty exciting and good, but I think this one's really great. I told you about Vote Riders a few meetings ago, the agency, the nonprofit, nonpartisan agency nationally that goes into states that have restrictive voter laws or these new voter IDs, which extraordinarily disproportionately impact Black students or Black people. And our district, of course, is filled with a lot of potential Black voters that will be impacted negatively by this new law. And so I met with those folks today. I told you I would. I met with them today. I've introduced them and passed them to the superintendent. It would be ideal. I'll keep talking about it. Well, that is nice. Thank you very much. There it is. You also have that link. I have Ms. Davis send you this link so you have all this too. You can check it out later. But I just want you all to know that I already ordered 2,500 cards in English and 250 cards in Spanish that we could maybe just start, I don't know, put it in main offices, in high schools that just have information and QR codes. So these folks make this extraordinarily simple. But they also are willing to dig in as much as they want. I've had parents reach out to me because I've said stuff on social media about this, and parents reach out that are like zealous about, they have train the trainer programs. Can I get down with this? Can I help in a school? I'm ready to volunteer. I was like, I don't know. I haven't even talked to these people. Well, I did talk to them today, and they do things like that. Again, not my place to coordinate all that, but I wanted to give the update to my colleagues because I know you all seemed excited about it. And the superintendent has an email introducing the leadership. There's a woman in Ohio whose sole purpose is to do this work. We are the first school district that has been working with them on this initiative, and they are very interested in figuring out what a model for other districts might look like. We're not the first school district, period. Minneapolis has done this, and they're doing a really nice job getting their kids this ID that they'll need to vote later in life. And that is my update.
Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Any other inquiries or updates? Ms. Bolton?
Yes, thank you. I have an inquiry and an update. I had hoped and I thought we were going to be able to talk at this meeting about the issue regarding the test for Walnut and the discussion as to whether or not that is traditionally, historically, in practice, it's been a role for the board to play. I think I've been unclear in my description of concern regarding the test, that the hope that the test, when we moved to Iowa, we were assured by the administration, not your administration, but 2 administrations ago, that the same kind of percentage of students would be, in all likelihood, able to enter based upon the test when we move to the Iowa test. So that's one thing. And I don't know that that's the case with the kids that have been accepted or have won the opportunity to participate at Walnut or join Walnut. So that's one thing. And I'd like to be able to know if that's a similar percentage in this new test that we use, Iowa test, versus the previous test. Because that was sort of, as I understood it, a promise basically that happened between us and the previous administration. The other piece is, of course, losing some families that we probably can't afford to lose. So I had hoped we'd be able to talk about whether or not and where we are. So I guess when we get to assignment, I'll do some sort of an assignment and a request for the percentage piece of number of students in the previous test versus this test that we use now for the Walnut. And I know that Mr. Lindy had expressed, I think when we had some writing back and forth about whether or not a decision had been made, I was under the impression we hadn't made the final decision about it. And then I think there was some discussion, it's too late. I don't think it's ever too late to make that kind of decision. And so I'm just bringing the Walnut piece back up, and maybe it becomes an assignment, I'm not sure. But that's my inquiry of the superintendent tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. On the data piece, didn't we look at that in the Cal meeting?
We've actually, that was the first data set that we sent, and so we can resend that data. That was actually before we did the Cal meeting in February, where we talked about the initial data. So we can, I've resent that, but
that would be great.
We can talk through it. We did it in Cal, and then when this came up previously, I resent it in the updates as well, but I can re-forward it also. The other thing that was also attached to that was the question that was asked about the GPA for the students that are now 8th graders that were enrolled in Walnut with the reduced cut score. So that information was sent as well.
Yeah, I recall reading that, and it's rather extensive, and I appreciated that. What I was not, maybe it's my misunderstanding, was seeing whether or not the percentage of kids eligible from the previous test and the current test had remained the same. And so and I must not have seen it when I was reading through that data.
I can re-forward it. It wasn't at the same time. It was actually before that information was shared. We did find that it was relatively similar in terms of the Terra Nova and the Iowa in terms of students and their eligibility.
That would be great, and I would like to, if you would resend it, I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Ms. Walton.
The other piece of that was that I think we also should have by now, maybe last year, again, not you, last year too, there was an RFP that was not issued regarding testing. And the administration had made the decision to extend the Iowa folks, wonderful, reputable, I'm not criticizing them, but to extend the contract for 1 year. So, and I think when we got a grip of that, I think it was decided that there should be an RFP for the possible new testing or to keep the same testing, because that RFP was done. It's extended by the administration, and that involved this year. So I would like to, maybe that's an assignment too, as to when that RFP might be issued for the testing.
We can do the follow-up on the assessment RFP because I think that the Iowa test was a part of the overall assessment RFP, as I understand. So we can do some, we can give some follow-up on that.
That'd be great. And I think it was up, but it was extended and without necessarily the board being aware. And I'm sure it's a great idea, but I don't want to miss out this opportunity yet again.
I think one of the questions that I have at this point, I do have a meeting tomorrow at Walnut Hills. And now I know hearing this conversation, it is going to come up tomorrow now that we are having this conversation. So I think I need to have some information from the board. I was under the impression, and I do apologize, I was under the impression that because we had not made a recommendation to change the cut scores, that we were not looking at doing change with the cut scores for this year. If that is not the will of the board, I think that that's something that it's really important for me to know that going into the meeting that I have with the Walnut Hills team tomorrow.
Superintendent, I was going to ask the same question. I think just for the purpose of establishing clarity, I know Eve, you and I were emailing about this. I also was under the impression that there was going to be no change to the Walnut score for next year. I personally don't support a change at this point. I'm only one voice, and I'm certainly open to arguments of the future. But I think given the fact that it's already almost May, I'm not supportive of a change for next year. Would it be helpful to hear from other board members about where people are?
It would be helpful for me because as I've spoken with board members prior to us getting to the meeting where we did the clarification, I did believe that we were in consensus with that. So knowing that there was not a vote. So to Board Member Bolton's point, there was not a board action that was taken around that. And it looks like that might be necessary so that we know how to proceed and so that we can prepare families and prepare those that would have concern with whatever decision we make one way or the other. Because there will be concerns on either side whether it's a reduction or not. I think that the Walnut Hills community has spoken very loudly about how they feel about it, but there is another population as well. And so just whatever the will of the board, that's what I need to know so we know how to proceed.
Yeah, so I think well, maybe we start, Mr. Morosky, and come down about whether there's a desire to have a different Walnut score for next year.
No desire.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Mrs. Weinberg?
I do not have a desire to lower the scores for next year per the Walnut.
Thank you. Ms. Jones? Mr. Craig?
Nope.
And Dr. Moffat?
No.
Okay, so I think that there's not a interest at this point in time. Does that get you what you need, Superintendent?
Yes.
Great.
It's more important to me that it be the board that decided necessarily than putting it onto the superintendent. So that is that's consistent. That's fine.
Thank you. Any other inquiries or updates? Great. I think as we close and go to clarify some assignments here to the extent that we have any, I just wanted to say, I think I wanted to recognize that I think we have this goal of making sure we are good stewards of our staff's time, parents' time, and community's time. And that we're also trying to focus on the most important priorities we've set as a board. I wrestle with the best way to construct these agendas. To Member Jones's point about what's on here or what isn't on here. My policy so far has been anybody who submits a request by the deadline, I put it on the agenda. That has the advantage of being like an even set of requirements for everybody. It has the disadvantage of making these quite long. And so I think at a future point, I might love to bring to the board some ideas that people could react to about how we decide what might get put to a different meeting or what might have a different channel or a better way of getting answered rather than a board meeting, I'd like to see us make some movement on this front. I just wanted to share that my policy so far has been, if it's submitted through the board office by the deadline, I make sure I put it on. Yeah, yes, please.
If I might comment, sometimes it's just common sense. When folks are thinking about whatever they put on, whatever goes on the agenda, it's common sense. This is a business meeting. We don't have to deal with everything all at once at any given meeting. There is no way. It's 9:15. And so I'm a little, so that's all I'll say, but I will, what I already wrote down is that I'm going to make some recommendations within the policy changes, within the bylaws changes around that.
Thank you very much. Any assignments? Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, this is a follow-up. I think the superintendent and I've had this brief discussion, and it may have occurred in finance, I'm not sure. Concerns from my neighborhood, very parochial about it, very chauvinistic, center of the universe, College Hill. The interest is and the concern is that the junior ROTC program that was scheduled to be opening at Aiken, which, by the way, is a previous campus for the most recent Ohio Military Academy, dating back all the way to the 1960s, it still existed, that there was a cut in staff that somehow cut the program. And the people of College Hill, very interested in their history, want to have now heard about that, even though the coffee shop is closed. I have now heard that somehow that junior ROTC program is been gone. So if you could look into that for us. It's a matter of one staff member, if I recall, and I think we've already made some investment, but more particularly so too is the federal government. And again, it was something that the board had kind of wanted for many, many years and finally got.
Say what was the assignment one more time, Ms. Bolton?
I need the superintendent to look up whether or not indeed what I'm hearing in the community that the junior ROTC program got cut because one staff member got cut. So that's the word on the street, so to speak. That's the word on Belmont.
I gotcha. And so it's a research request.
I don't know if it's an information.
Or assignment's fine. I was
Yeah.
wanting to stick to our assignments require a majority of the board or a consensus. And so is there any questions about what Eve is, or Ms. Bolton's asking for, Superintendent? And any dissent from any board members? Any other assignments this evening?
I have clarification.
Dr. Moffitt?
So I asked about the transportation, and I've been trying to look it up a little bit because I asked about this. It came up in looking at the notes. It came up in November 7th, and on page 42 of the 3B minutes, it's where we talked about transportation, and it does say in there, and I don't think I saved it, but board member, it just says board member asked about transportation and other issues. You can go back and look at that. But we also talked about it at the January 17th presentation. Let me clarify. Let me stop for a second and clarify. What I asked for was originally about the public school students being on the same routes as the private school students and the economics behind that as a potential measure to perhaps reduce some of our bus load and or reduce some costs, have some cost savings. I asked for that. We talked about that it was November the 7th minutes. At the January 17th presentation, there was a question asked about the Ohio Revised Code and whether or not that is feasible from a state level. And so our counsel, general counsel, provided us on January the 29th the Ohio Revised Code regarding transportation and how that transportation is not restricted to provide collaborative transportation for public school students of CPS and private charter school students. That was January the 29th, per email that everyone received. And so that assignment has not technically been completed. And so the purpose of this, because you asked a question about it being an assignment, I gave everyone the email and clarified it. So I'm requesting that it be a formal assignment now as in May, because we're talking about transportation and the impact fiscally and the impact to our students. And I wanted that as a potential option so that we could discuss it to see what it would look like from a financial standpoint as a measure to hopefully reduce some of our costs. So I just wanted to provide those dates because we had this back and forth, via email. That's not an assignment. It has to be made on the floor, all of this other. And so I wanted to provide the dates for clarity. It's in the board minutes from December, but it's November 7th. It's under 3B, special minutes, page 42, where we talked about it. And then council provided us the actual revised code via email, which everyone now has, January the 29th. So when we say that it's going to take time, I'm hoping that it doesn't take an exorbitant amount of time because the request was made some time ago. So that's just the clarification that I wanted to provide regarding the assignment that apparently was needed.
I think this is really helpful, and I appreciate you raising it, Dr. Moffat. I think you're right that the topic has come up a number of different times, and it hasn't yet been voted on as an assignment in a meeting in a space like this. And so I think we should figure out like whether this is something that the board wants to assign to the superintendent. I think superintendent, did you want to speak to any piece of it?
Just let me clarify, it was an assignment. It's under assignments on the board minutes. It's under assignment.
What was the date where it was listed on the assignment? I heard you say that it had been discussed a number of times. What was the date when it was listed in the assignments?
It's under November the 7th. It's 3B. It's December. We voted on it in December, page 42, and it just says board member, and it asked under assignments. So it was formalized in some measure. And then we got a presentation January the 17th. I believe that's a CAL. We got the presentation, and then the question was further asked of council, were there any limitations?
Dr. Moffat, you're just faster than I am. What was the date of the meeting where we approved the minutes that had the request listed as an assignment?
December, let me see, let me go back to 2022. So it was the December 5th meeting. If you look under 3B business,
I'm looking at the minutes for the November 7th meeting that would have been approved at the December 5th meeting.
on page 42, it says board member had some concerns. This is under board matters regarding transportation, bus cards, timeline for all students to receive bus cards, the picking up and dropping off all students sort of board. And then now, in the best interest of time, I'm happy to, because I sent this email, and so I see one of my colleagues getting a little annoyed, which is going to make me annoyed. So we can talk about it offline because I brought this up during the week. But I wanted to formalize it as an assignment because I wanted to find out the data. But in the best interest of time, like I said, it's 9:23. I'm happy we can do this part in the background because I don't want anyone to be disrespectful to everyone. I don't want to be disrespectful to everybody's time. So I just wanted to bring it up. We did talk about this in December. We talked about it again in January.
I think this is actually a really good and helpful discussion because I think it has been discussed many times, but I haven't seen it listed as an assignment. It may become an assignment, but now would be the time for us to do that. Superintendent, you were wanting to share something too.
Correct. And so we do really try to work to make sure that we are following up in the assignments. And I will agree that you have asked this question more than once in terms of whether or not the charter school students could ride the bus with the public school students. It was not necessarily given to us as an assignment, as I understand, but if we are in error, we can address that. The challenge at this point, and this is what I shared in the communication that we had, when we looked at the best routing process for all of the students, and that was starting with the experts that we work with from formative, it is not just a matter of the students riding the bus together. There has to be a pairing of the students around time because it then limits the amount of time that it takes to get from one location to another, and the actual living space for the students has to be in the same vicinity in order for them to even be able to ride the bus together. So what we've asked the team to do as a follow-up to the request, the email that you sent last week, we have asked the team to do a snapshot of that, but knowing right now that that is not going to be the most efficient way for us, I do have concern about our team taking time away from scheduling for summer school and really trying to get scheduled for transportation for the school year to try to run a complete different scenario that we know going into that scenario is going to be problematic. So what the team did share with me is that in about 2 weeks, we will have a snapshot, so at least it gives a response to why this information is a concern. I do recognize that it was done in the district several years ago. It was also at a time when buses and drivers were in abundance. And so having to have the efficiency around the drivers was not necessarily the same based on the information that we've been provided. But we are working on a snapshot for you so that we can be responsive to your question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else, assignments for the group this evening? Okay, having no other business before us, I declare our meeting adjourned. Have a good, just kidding.
Yeah,
No, I'm so sorry. Look at me. So swiftly, and I apologize, that's my fault. Does anybody have any announcements or kudos? That's what happens when I don't stare at the agenda. Any announcements or kudos this evening?
I only have one, and the team, we will still follow up on Aiken, but the team did confirm that the JROTC position has not been removed from Aiken, so we will do follow-up so we can do clarification.
Great, so it does exist.
Based on what was shared with me, I want to make sure that there is not more than one position because I was informed that the one position was
I'll
still
be
at
able
the
to
school.
be on the avenue.
Okay, any announcements or kudos? Mrs. Weinberg.
I'll be really quick with my kudos. I know that everyone is ready to leave, but if you look up on your screen, or if you look up at the screen, I just wanted to give acknowledgement to not Vice President, I'm so sorry, President Lindy, I know your title, and Dr. Kareem Moffitt for attending the HCDP Spring Fling. And then in the center, I got the opportunity to attend the Flying Pig Scholars Breakfast, in which a Walnut Hills senior by the name of Kate Stein, she was able to win a 4-year scholarship for her community service in the community. And then the last picture, yes, that's a big clap for her. Yes, yes, yes. And then in the last picture, I was able to attend a press conference given by the Hamilton County President, Alicia Reese, for the Cincinnati Black Music Hall of Fame. And within her presentation, she also kind of gave a timeline of when they were going to break ground to showcase this particular place that will be open not only to the city, but also to the children of CPS. And one of her big things that she wanted the students to know is that there's so many alumni that have graduated from CPS schools that are in the music industry, and she's excited to share that with our students. And then my next slide is, I just wanted to give a huge round of applause to our board member, Carolyn Jones, for receiving an award from the University of Cincinnati as a distinguished alumni. So let's give her a round of applause for all of her service and work. And I think that's it in terms of my kudos.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Any other kudos this evening? Ms. Bolton.
Kudos to the Sands community, Sands Montessori in Mount Washington, where they dedicated a natural playscape and also celebrated the planting of 70 trees in their campus area. And just wanted to share that they were thrilled, particularly when it was announced, of course, by their principal, that the Montessori curriculum was to be adopted tonight. A great cheer came up from the whole group. So congratulations to the parent group and to the students and to the staff and some district staff too that helped make a grant possible for that. And just wanted to remind you that George F. Sands is the person for whom the school is named. And he was not only a great baseball player, but also was the first president of the Baseball Players Union. So we've got this whole labor thing happening with these Montessori folk.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Any other kudos this evening? Dr. Moffat?
So I really wish that more people had heard this, but I got an opportunity to visit Chevy at a naturalization ceremony. But the cool thing is it was run by the students. It was so cool. We have 4 student leaders. I'm sorry, I had to do my own PowerPoint because Rob was busy and he does them so much better than myself. But there were 4 students that got up and led. So I'm sorry, the one is behind everybody. But that one at the bottom is the 2nd grade class that sung "The World is a Rainbow." It was so cool. In the best interest of time, I won't share that because it's really 2 minutes long. And we kind of need it right now to change the energy vibe in here. But it was the best welcoming ceremony I have ever seen. And it was on the news too, just in case you caught it. So my next thing is we had one, well, did you get the second slide? That was a congratulations to Board Member Jones on her award, and there should have been one more. So one of our Clark High School students was Miss Teen, and it says congratulations to Maya Williams. She was honored with Miss Maya Williams Day or Miss Teen Cincinnati. And so I wanted to make sure that I said congratulations to her. I was trying to do that while some of her colleagues were here, but I didn't have an opportunity to. What? I'm sorry, Naya, I done spelled it wrong. So again, I had to do my own presentation today, but congratulations on your day, your special day. So that was it. And then congratulations to my colleague, Board Member Jones.
Thank you, Dr. Moffat. Any last announcements or kudos? Mr. Craig?
Just wanted to remind everybody that Wednesday is Administrative Professionals Day, and I want to thank all of the wonderful administrative professionals we have here in the district who do all the real hard work that all of us board members get to take credit for and pretend like we did ourselves, and that the district gets to pretend that we did without them. So we all know that you all are backbones of our district and do so much work that is so underappreciated.
Hear, hear. Any, Mr. Morosky, bring us home.
In case nobody else was paying attention, kudos to Chairwoman Weinberg for hosting the shortest meeting in the month of March.
Thank you, Mr.
It was on their slide.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky.
You're welcome.
Any other last items, having no other business before us? Checking. I declare our meeting adjourned.
Yeah.